I'm honestly not exactly sure where I should start with this. It's something that I've kept silent about for over half a decade at this point, both because of the vow that my friends and I made that night, and honestly because it's been the only way I've been able to stay relatively sane since then. I already wake up almost nightly, covered in a literal sheet of sweat with my heart racing from the nightmares. That's what I spent the last several years telling myself. It was only a nightmare, nothing more. And for the most part, it seemed to work. That was until a week ago, when I saw something which shattered that illusion into a million pieces. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself, I guess. I should start from the beginning. You see, I lived in a medium-sized coastal town in the Pacific Northwest, one which had been around since the 1850s at least, one which had developed many tales of supernatural occurrences all over it. Accounts of strange happenings have been reported for over half a century or more, ranging from ghostly voices emanating from where the town's once bustling logging building stood on the edge of the estuary, to noises of old motion pictures playing after hours in the old Egyptian-style theater downtown, one of the last remaining in the United States, to the sounds of ghostly music and laughter coming from the ballroom of the old hotel, now converted into apartments. But one of the biggest ones, so big it used to be a centerpiece of the annual Halloween ghost tours in town, was the old hospital. Built in the mid-1920s, it served as the town's sole hospital until the early 70s, when the modern one was built and the old one shut down. For a short period of time between the 80s and the early 90s, it housed a community college, but it too left, leaving it again silent and abandoned. The official reasoning given was that the structure wasn't up to proper code, and the costs in bringing it up to modern standards would be just too expensive. But as with every town, rumors spread about the real reason why nobody would occupy it for long. Whispered in hushed tones by the older townsfolk were rumors of, to put it simply, rather sinister and horrifying things which went on inside the building's walls. Tales of unethical experimentations being performed on patients and volunteers from the local state hospital, of doctors being involved in the occult and performing witchcraft ceremonies after hours in the basement, and of things equally as vile, which they refused to speak about out loud at all. To my friend group, all who were extremely interested in the supernatural and urban legends, the tale of the hospital was the most exciting thing about our town. Every year since we were 6 or 7, we would go to the annual Halloween haunt walk. And every time the tour guide stopped us in front of the red and tan building, we would all perk up, craning our necks and looking up at the windows, hoping to catch a glimpse of some specter staring down at us. But nothing ever happened. And as the turn of the century rolled around, leading from the 2000s into the 2010s, our enthusiasm for it seemed to wane slightly. We all became wrapped up in our own personal lives, and soon, our annual meetup was forgotten about. That was until one cold, rainy day in early 2018. I had just gotten up for the day, as it was my day off from work, when my phone rang on my bedside table. Reaching over the bed, I picked it up and was surprised to see Johnny's name staring back at me. I quickly answered it. "Hello?" A moment later, Johnny's deep and booming voice rang through the phone.
"Hey, Mikey boy, how are ya?"
I hadn't heard from my friend in almost 3 years since he had gone to Eugene for college. I let out a small laugh. "Dude, been a hot minute since I heard from you." "I've been alright. What about you? How's school going?" I sat down in my desk chair as he answered.
Nah, school's been going fine, bro. Thanks for asking.
His voice took on a teasing tone.
I heard you're going to be turning 28 this summer, huh?
I groaned. "Dude, don't remind me. I'd like to pretend that turning 30 wasn't only a handful of years away." He let out another laugh.
Hey, how do you think I feel when I'm 35 now?
"My bad, man." I laughed back and then looked out the window. "So are you back in town or something?" I asked. I heard him shift on the phone.
Yeah, actually I am, for about a week or so. That's actually the reason that I called. Are you doing anything right now?
I glanced at the clock. The large white numbers showed it was a little after 10:30. Nah, not right now. Today's my day off and I'm not meeting Ruby until tonight for dinner. A smacking sound came from my friend's end of the call.
Oh yeah, that's right. Today is your guys' 5-year anniversary. Congrats.
I thanked him and then he continued.
Look, I called up the others a few minutes ago. We're all meeting at the diner in the strip mall parking lot down from Walmart. Come and join us. I've got something for us to do for old time's sake, now that we're all back in town.
I allowed myself a small grin. Knowing Johnny, this was going to be interesting, to say the least. Alright man, just give me half an hour to get dressed and drive down there. About 35 minutes later, I pulled into the strip mall's parking lot. Spying my friend's Cadillac, I parked next to it and walked into the diner. The smell of home-cooked bacon and eggs washed over me. Many of the patrons in the diner were late risers, having a breakfast while they still could. Turning to my right, I spied a hand waving over the top of the far booth. Over here, Mike. Waving at Francine, the diner's owner, I strode across the tiled floor and slid into the empty spot on the red vinyl bench. Looking up, I was greeted by the 3 smiling faces of my friends. Hey Mike, long time bro, Lucas exclaimed, reaching across the booth to fist bump me. Addie gave me a small wave from the other side of him, the curls of her auburn hair bouncing slightly on her shoulders. A thick hand fell on my shoulder, and I turned to see Johnny's ginormous grin looking down at me. Hey dude, he said simply. I happily exchanged greetings with them all, and after ordering a grilled cheese sandwich and a coffee, we all fell into old times, laughing and telling each other what we had been up to since we had last seen each other. I was the only one who had stayed in town, working for a decent pay at the fish processing plant down the coast, and occasionally on one of the fishing boats during the summertime. Johnny had gone off to college in Eugene, while Lucas had gone off to Portland for some big-time job. Addie had moved up to Seattle to work as a photographer, her passion. As our food was brought to us, I realized for the first time how much I missed our friend group, how much I missed hanging out with them. I had a small group of other locals that I was friends with, and of course, I had Ruby. But the dynamic that the 4 of us shared was something that nobody else could replicate. Okay, so you're all probably wondering why I gathered us all here, right? Johnny said as we had finished eating. Yeah, well duh, Lucas said, putting on a dumb expression. I thought you had brought us here to sit and jam our thumbs up our butts. And Johnny flipped him the bird with a laugh as Addie let out a giggle. Okay, wise guy, he proclaimed, and then reached into the bag next to him. No, I brought you here because I saw this yesterday. He pulled out a copy of our town's local newspaper, The World, and laid it on the table. I craned my neck to read the headline. Macaulay Hospital to be demolished in coming weeks. No way, Lucas said, panning over the article and then looking up. Addie leaned in for a turn to read it herself. So they're finally going to actually tear it down, she asked, looking up. Johnny shrugged his shoulders. Sure seems like it. They're going to turn the area into some kind of parking lot or something according to the article. I leaned back in the booth, feeling a small wave of sadness wash over me, and said the only thing that I could think of. Well, that sucks. It felt not only as though a piece of our town's history, however sordid, was about to be destroyed, but also a beloved piece of our own personal ones. The tours to the hospital had been such a staple of our childhoods that losing it almost felt like finally having to part with a childhood stuffed animal, as strange as it may seem. Johnny nodded. It does suck, but it says here that it won't be torn down until early to mid-April. That means that it'll still be standing like the headline says for a few more weeks. I sat up a little straighter, hearing something come into my friend's voice. It was almost a mischievous tone. Oh boy, he's got something planned. The other 2 seemed to have picked up on it as well. "What are you thinking?" Lucas asked him, leaning forward on his elbows. Johnny lowered his voice to make sure that he couldn't be heard. "I'm thinking that we never got a chance to see inside the place. So, why don't we sneak inside this weekend and check it out? Make an adventure of it." Now everybody was sitting up straight and staring at him. "You're serious?" Addie asked quietly. "Has a heart attack," he proclaimed. I let out a soft laugh. "Dude, you are still as nuts as ever." He looked at me, giving his trademark grin. "Don't you know it, man," he said. "What about the cops, though?" Lucas asked him. "You know the town's been chasing the homeless out of there for years. And they'll likely be on guard these next few weeks until it's rubble." Johnny kept grinning. "I know for a fact that there'll be other places this weekend, seeing as how it's Easter on Sunday. We'll have about a 2-hour window Saturday night where we can slip inside, look around, and slip out again without being caught." He looked around at us. "So what about it? One last hurrah, one last adventure with the hospital, to mark the end of an era." For a second there was no answer, and then Lucas let out a soft laugh of his own. "Why not? I'm in." Johnny turned to look at Addie, who shrugged, giving a small smile of her own. "I'm in. This is the last time we'll have the chance to see the place anyways. I always wanted to see the inside." I became aware that everybody was now looking at me, waiting for me to give my answer. "Mike?" Johnny asked. For the slightest of seconds, a small part of me said that it was a bad idea, especially with how gung-ho the cops in town could be. But then I pushed it away. This might be one of the last memories that we'll have together, before our lives truly move apart. You'll regret this if you turn it down, man. "Sure, why not?" I said, grinning. "Yeah, I'm in." And with that, the plan was set. Later that night, as I went on my anniversary date with Ruby, I pushed the plan out of my mind, allowing myself to get lost in her beautiful blue eyes and brown hair, everything else seeming to drift away. But as I lay in bed, hearing her softly breathing next to me, I stared up at the darkened ceiling above me and wondered what I had gotten myself into. The rest of the week seemed to pass by in a blur, and before I knew it, Saturday had arrived. As the afternoon drew on, I made a trip to my local mercantile store, picking up a few items I felt that I would need for our adventure. Finally, as the last remnants of daylight faded from the sky, I drove from my side of town to the other, where the others were waiting for me. As I turned onto Commercial Ave, the headlights of my Ford Taurus bounced off the faded and peeling tan and red paint, reflecting back in the glass of the hospital. And then I passed it, driving a little further down the street and parking across from the town park. And getting out of the car, I retrieved my items from the trunk and walked back towards the meeting spot. Many lights were still on in the neighborhood houses, and I let out a silent prayer that nobody would gaze out of their windows and see us. The chilly spring air whipped at my face as I crossed the street, until I was standing quite literally in the shadow of the 4-story building. I stopped and looked up at it, finally for the first time in my life appreciating how big it was. It stretched up and away from me, seeming almost imposing in the gathering darkness. It almost looks like a slumbering beast in the gloom, one which could wake up at any moment. I shook my head slightly. Where had that thought come from? The wind whipped at my back and a slight shiver shot up my spine, though I didn't know whether it was from the cold or the building. That was when a hand fell on my shoulder. I about jumped a foot off the ground, choking off the cry that had bubbled up in my throat. Behind me, I heard a quiet laugh and whirled around to see Johnny giving me that grin. "Oh, come on, man," I hissed at him, though I let out a soft laugh of relief. "What, did I scare you?" He joked, nudging my shoulder, and then motioned towards the back of the building. "Come on, the others are waiting around back." He noticed my bag and gestured to it. What do you got in there? I unzipped it, opening it up to show him. A pair of gloves so I don't cut myself in the glass or metal, a flashlight so we can see where we're going, and I pulled a camcorder out of the bag. That to document it. He let out a low whistle. "Then that is why we always rely on you, my man. You always come prepared." And with that, he led me around to the back of the hospital. Lucas and Addie were indeed waiting for us near a rear window. I saw with a small measure of disapproval that somebody, likely Johnny or Lucas, had broken the glass out. "So, who's going first?" Johnny whispered, looking around. "I guess I'll do it," Lucas whispered back after a second. He cleared away the remaining fragments of broken glass and then boosted himself up and over the window ledge until he had disappeared inside. A moment later, he stuck his head back out. "Hey, it's all right, come on in," he said, a huge smile already formed on his face. And Johnny helped Addie up next and then slid up and inside himself. For a few moments, I was left alone outside and I quickly looked around. The woods which stood behind the hospital slid away into the darkness, and I noticed for the first time how there was no sound of animals calling, no rustle of elk sliding through the woods, no owls, nothing. The realization made another shiver slide up my spine, though I couldn't tell again why. I scoffed. "Come on, it's barely out of winter, Michael. Most animals aren't even out yet. Stop spooking yourself over some stupid stuff." And with that, I reached up and grabbed the window ledge, pulling myself up and sliding inside. The first thing I noticed when I stood up was just how musty it seemed to be. The air almost seemed thick, heavy laden with dust and God only knew what else. Hope to God that I don't breathe in too much asbestos or something. I forgot to bring a mask. Reaching into my bag, I pulled out first the gloves and then the flashlight. Snapping it on, I hooded the beam slightly with my free hand and shone it around. The room which we had entered was large and, as I had figured it would be, empty. The same tan color which adorned the outside of the building graced the walls in here, though the floor seemed to be tiled. I could only guess what purpose it had served in the days of it being a hospital, as it had closed long before I had been born. It could be a room for administrative purposes, or it could have been a patient room. I'll never know. That's when I noticed that I was alone in the room. What the? I hadn't even heard the other three leave the room, and had I been too distracted by my surroundings to immediately notice it. Guys?" I called out softly. For a few moments there was silence and then the sound of footsteps came from the doorway beyond. The footsteps approached the door and for a microsecond, I felt yet another shiver pass through me. A dark figure appeared in the doorway, and for a moment, I almost felt afraid to lift the light and shine it towards them, afraid of whom or what I might see. But then I shook the apprehension from my mind and lifted my hand off the light. Johnny gazed at me, an even wider grin than usual spread ear to ear. He waved for me to follow him. "Come on," he whispered. "This place is freaking bonkers." I hurried behind him, stepping out of the room into a long corridor which stretched away from us and out of sight. The other two were waiting for us, and we all now began to grin like idiots as we collectively felt like we had as teenagers, when we would sneak into the movie theater to watch an R-rated flick at 14 or 15. It was the thrill of being somewhere that we weren't supposed to be, and it brought back the feeling of being younger and, admittedly, more full of life. "So, where do you want to start?" Addie asked us. "There are 4 floors to check out plus the basement, and we've only got a small amount of time for all of it." And Johnny rubbed the stubble of hair on his chin. "I'm thinking we start from here and then move to the upper floors. We'll leave the basement for last." Looking around, we all nodded our heads, agreeing with the plan. I pulled out the camcorder and handed it to Addie. "You're the best at filming out of all of us," I told her, "so you record everything." For the next 35 to 40 minutes, we slowly moved from room to room and from floor to floor. The others had also brought flashlights, and with each room we shown them into, we were rewarded with either an empty space or occasionally a few tables and desks, likely left behind by from its college days. Still, despite the slight disappointment that the empty rooms brought us, we still eagerly checked out each room, speculating on what they would have been in the old days. And this might have been the maternity wing, Addie whispered once we had reached the 3rd floor and aimed the camera into a large series of rooms. And this might have been where my mother and grandmother were born. Her excitement bolstered the rest of us, and we kept moving on, finally reaching the top floor. This floor seemed to have few walls remaining on it, and we walked from one end of the top floor to the other without much obstruction. As we reached the far end of the floor, something caught Lucas's eye and he shone his light into a corner. "Hey, check out this graffiti," he said. We huddled up around him and aimed our lights at the dark red letters spray painted on the wall. "Beware of Dr. Craddock." Lucas let out a soft laugh. "Holy crap, I had almost forgotten about the legend of Dr. Craddock." He whispered softly, almost more to himself than us. But his words seemed to unlock a long-forgotten memory in my mind. One of a story that the tour guide who had led us around one year in the early 2000s had told only once and for whatever reason never told again. According to him, Dr. Craddock had been one of the head surgeons at Macaulay Hospital from the late 30s into the mid-60s, a man who was as gifted with his mind as his hands. He was also, according to the rumors, one of the most evil men to boot. He had supposedly headed up many, if not all, of the unethical experimentations, even doing surgery without any anesthesia, as well as led other members of the medical staff in occult worship. The tour guide said that Craddock had been terrified of one thing, and one thing alone: death. He used the experiments and occult worshipping to attempt to find a way to live for eternity, to escape the clutches of the Grim Reaper, and escape the fate which awaited him in hell. The tour guide had ended with, but it seemingly hadn't worked as the man had died in the late 70s. My friends, also having remembered the story, were softly chattering to themselves about the message, but I had stopped listening to what they were saying. As I had mentally recalled the story myself, an odd sensation had begun to settle over me, one which I hadn't felt during our entire journey through the hospital, which churned and twisted my gut into a knot. It was the feeling of being stared at, the kind which attempted to burn a hole directly through the back of your skull. Turning away from the others, I looked back towards the other end of the building. With my flashlight lowered, I couldn't see much in the gloom, but I saw one thing. Many of the windows hadn't been boarded up, especially on this floor, and the yellow glow of the streetlights outside shone inside, casting long shadows into dim view of the area. Over in the far corner was a shadow, one which was darker than the rest. That wasn't what drew my gaze and choked off my breath in my throat. It was in the shape of a person, one standing just out of sight. The feeling of being stared at intensified, and I swear that I saw the shadowy figure take a step towards us. I quickly unhooded my flashlight, aiming it straight at the figure. There was nothing there. It was almost as if the beam of light had banished it away, if it was even there in the first place. As I aimed the flashlight around, I felt something brush against the nape of my neck, causing me to let out an involuntary gasp as a lightning bolt shot up my spine. I whirled around to face behind me, the beam of my light splashing off my friends as they turned to look at me. There was nothing there again. My breath came in short, ragged gasps as I attempted to steady myself. "Dude, what's up?" Lucas asked me. For a second, I considered telling them what I had seen, but then I shook my head. "Oh, nothing, man," I said, hoping that my voice sounded calmer than I had felt. "Look, let's just finish up and get out of here, okay? I just don't want to stay in here too long with God only knows what in the air." I saw Lucas and Johnny immediately accept my answer. But Addie lowered the camera and gave me a serious look. She knew that something was up. She always did with me. I simply shook my head at her, letting her know that I didn't want to say anything. Johnny finally sighed. "All right, now let's quickly run downstairs and check out the basement and we'll book it." I let out a breath that I hadn't realized I had been holding and then nodded. "Yeah, sounds like a plan to me," I said, and then stepped out of the way as our friend led the way back downstairs. I brought up the rear this time, occasionally looking behind us and shining my light around. The feeling of being watched hadn't gone away as we moved back downstairs. It seemed to almost follow us, staying just out of sight behind a corner or in a stairwell. I couldn't hear anything, but all my instincts were telling me to be on guard. I reached under the waistband of my coat and massaged the handle of the hunting knife that I had strapped there, feeling slightly comforted by it. Finally, we stood at the door to the basement. A set of steps lined with a rusting railing led down. For a second, I debated on telling the others to forget the basement and just leave. But no, as creeped out as I felt, I attempted to be rational. "You aren't being followed, dude. You didn't see anything. You're freaking yourself out over nothing. Don't ruin this for everyone else." And so, still repeating those thoughts to myself, I followed the others down the steps. The sound of water dripping from somewhere deeper still echoed back in the silence as we stepped off the final step and into the bowels of the building. Shining our lights around, we saw that there were many rooms leading off in different directions. It almost seemed like a maze in a way. Lifting the light, I saw a plaque mounted on the concrete archway. "Surgical wing." "Oh, that's great," Addie said sarcastically, spotting it as well. "Have the freaking surgical wing in the basement." Johnny turned to us after staring out into the darkness for a second. "All right, let's quickly check this out," he muttered softly. I noticed for the first time tonight that he seemed to be on edge himself. The excitement that he had shown until now had almost completely evaporated. Did he see something too? The thoughts swam through my mind, but before I could decide to ask out loud, he turned and led the way deeper into the basement. A feeling as though ants and roaches had burrowed under my skin and were inching their way along beneath it. I hurried after them. The corridor and rooms seemed to go on forever, though they were all empty. The feeling of being observed and scrutinized refused to leave me, and I kept looking behind me, hating when I had my back to the darkness. Finally, I stopped. "All right, this is far enough. Time to tell everybody that it's time to leave," I thought. I opened my mouth. "Hey guys." They all stopped and turned to look at me. But before I could say anything more, all of our flashlights went out. And I don't mean they went out one at a time, even within just a few seconds of each other. I mean they went out at the exact same time, something which should be downright impossible. Everything was plunged into pitch blackness, one which I had never experienced before. "What just happened?" I heard Lucas exclaim somewhere off to my left. "I don't know, where are you?" Addie said, her voice now holding a noticeable trace of fear in it. As I heard them attempting to make their way to each other, the feeling of something brushing against the nape of my neck had returned. I felt my heart begin to race and my breath hitch again in my throat. And then my heart stopped entirely as I heard the sound. It came from just behind me and to the right, almost soft enough to miss, but not quite. It was a voice, a man's voice, low and gravelly, one which I had never heard before in my life. And it seemed to hold more malice and evil in it than I thought a human's voice ever could. "A decent subject," it whispered quietly, "but not quite suitable enough." The brushing against my neck pulled away and I felt my breath return, though in extremely ragged gasps, almost as if I were beginning to hyperventilate. What the heck?" I managed to breathe out, turning around in a circle and pulling the knife from its sheath. I shot it out into the blackness, slashing around, but feeling nothing meet the blade's swings. "Who's down here?" I finally demanded, finally raising my voice. Lucas and Addie stopped calling to each other at my words. "Mike, what are you talking about?" I heard Addie call out, the terror in her voice now almost as palpable as what I felt. Before I could answer, though, I suddenly heard her let out a yelp. "Addie!" I yelled, my voice echoing off the stone walls. I heard her begin to whimper and cry, but she didn't respond. A moment later, I heard Lucas gasp as well. Not even a hair's breadth after, all of our flashlights flickered back to life. The second the beam returned, I whipped it up and looked in all directions. I saw nothing, no sign of anybody behind me. Turning back, I saw Lucas doing the same, as if he were looking for someone as well. Addie, though, she had crumpled against the wall, dropping the camcorder and covering her face with her hands, sobbing loudly. I dashed towards her, kneeling down beside her. "Addie, what happened?" I asked, but she simply shook her head and continued crying. I looked up at Lucas. "Dude, what happened?" I demanded a little more forcefully than I had intended. For a moment, he didn't answer me, and then he turned his face towards me. I saw almost all the color had drained out of it, and he wore a look of abject horror on his face. He looked down at the ground and muttered something quietly. I stood up slightly, keeping a hand on Addie's shoulder. "What?" "Not good enough," I heard him whisper, and then he looked at me again. "That's what the voice said to me, not good enough," it said. I felt my throat close up at his words, and my breath again choked off. He heard the voice too. Addie stopped crying, and I looked down at her. I saw her staring at Lucas with an even stronger look of horror than he wore. She said nothing, but she didn't have to. All three of us had heard the disembodied voice declaring us not good enough. For what, I didn't know, and I didn't want to know. I swallowed, forcing my throat to open back up and forcing my voice out. "Okay, we had our fun. I think it's time to leave now." Both of them nodded at me, and I reached down and helped Addie to her feet. She locked eyes with me and finally spoke. "We need to get out of here right now," she whispered quietly. I nodded. Agreed. I turned. "Come on, Johnny, time to go," I said out loud. Johnny was gone. The area where he had been standing slightly ahead of the rest of us and farther down the corridor was completely empty of life. "What?" Lucas muttered out, turning to look. "Where did he—" I realized with a start that I hadn't heard our friend utter a word since the flashlights had gone out. Not a word and not a noise. "Johnny!" I called out, my voice again echoing in the silence, only broken by the dripping of water somewhere. No reply. "Johnny, where are you?" Lucas called out himself. Again, all that we heard was the echo of his voice filtering deeper into the basement and back to us. Oh, screw me. I whipped my light around, finally looking down to where he had been standing. Footprints turned and led away into the darkness. Johnny's footprints. I recognized the tread of his hiking boots. Lucas spotted it as well, stepping forward and aiming his own beam down at them and then into the dark corridor. He turned back to me. "What do we do?" he asked, his voice shaking slightly. Addie grabbed my arm. "Mike, we can't leave him down here," she whispered, her voice holding an almost desperate tone to it. Even still, for a moment I debated on snatching her up, yelling for Lucas to run for the exit, and simply calling the cops from outside. It'd mean we'd get in major trouble, but at this point, that might actually be preferable to the alternative. But I knew that Addie was right. If it had been myself or Lucas who had vanished, our friend wouldn't leave until he had found us, no matter how terrifying the situation was. Addie's right, we have to find him and then get the heck out of here, I said. Lucas looked petrified at the prospect of going deeper into the basement, but he nodded. With Addie still clinging onto my arm for dear life, I slowly led the way down the corridor, following our friend's footprints. We stayed close to one another, constantly shining our flashlight beams into every dark room and corner that we approached. The feeling of being watched was still there, but now it was much, much worse. It felt like dozens of people were watching us, all with the worst intentions in store for us. Or not people, but other things. Trying to steel myself, I kept going, pretending that I didn't hear the sounds, ones which would sound like a foot scraping against the floor from a bend in the corridor behind us, or of fingernails against the concrete walls. Finally, we reached a larger than normal doorway. Aiming my flashlight up at the archway overhead, I saw another plaque. Operation Room 1, Major Surgery. For some reason, those 4 words sent a new flush of fear through me. I hadn't wanted to admit it, but I had begun to think of the building as a slumbering animal, one which we had accidentally woken up from our intrusion. And finding this room almost felt like walking quite literally into the belly of the beast. Swallowing hard again, I forced out a long breath and shone my light into the room. I was not prepared for what I saw. I thought that, like the rest of the building, that this room too would be empty, but it wasn't. What looked like an old operating table, long since taken over by decades of rust, stood in the middle of the room. Overturned medical carts of medical tools lay strewn around it. I spied rusty scalpels and sewing equipment littering the floor, along with faded and rotting surgical masks. Aiming my light to the side, I saw many medical cabinets lining the sides of the walls. The entire room, if possible, gave off the worst vibes of the entire building. I never thought that an inanimate object such as a room could feel evil before, but now I did, most decidedly. That was when I aimed the flashlight at the back wall. All 3 of us let out an almost collective gasp. Johnny stood almost directly against the wall, his back to us. I couldn't see his flashlight in either of his hands anymore, and he seemed to rest his head against the damp concrete. For a moment, I thought that there was silence in this room as well, until the sound reached my ears, one which made my heart almost stop again. It was the sound of a voice talking fast, low and quietly, but it was in a tongue that I had never heard before, and honestly, one I don't think that I was ever supposed to hear. It sounded almost demonic in its tone and cadence. Another realization crashed over me, sending another lightning bolt of fear through me. It was Johnny's voice muttering a language that I knew well he didn't know, for all his intelligence. That was when Lucas raised his light and aimed it at Johnny's back. Johnny?" he said quietly. Instantly, the whimpering stopped. Everything stopped. All sound in the basement ceased, including the dripping water. It was as if all the sound had been sucked out of the basement entirely, and my ears began to ring viciously in the stillness, one which held the most terrible edges to it. That was a mistake, my mind raced. Calling out to him was a mistake. And then Johnny moved. He took a single step back away from the wall, straightening up to his full height. At 6'7", he towered over all of us. He twisted his head from side to side, cracking his neck with an almost sickening sound, and moved his shoulders, almost as if he were trying to get the feeling back into them, or get used to them. And then he spoke. "Good evening," he said simply. My heart began to race at the 2 words that he uttered. It had been Johnny's voice, yes, but it was wrong. The way that he spoke, his inflection and cadence were nothing like how I knew my friend to speak. It was as if somebody else were using his voice to speak, Almost as if he knew my thoughts, he turned towards us slowly, and this time my heart truly did stop. Johnny stared at us, a smile in his face that I had never seen before, one which had none of his usual goofiness or happiness in it. The smile held only evil to it, evil and a sinister glee. That wasn't what made me clap a hand over my mouth to keep from screaming. It was his eyes. His usual hazel eyes were gone, and in their place were bright green ones which I knew instantly weren't his. I looked down and with the largest pang of horror shooting through me, realized that he was holding something, one of the rusty scalpels. "Oh crap," Addie whispered, it causing our friend to let out a low, sadistic-sounding chuckle. And then he was suddenly a blur of motion rushing towards us. I had already slowly been moving though, hoping that he wouldn't see me trying to reach towards the door to the room, which had swung in. Moving almost as quickly as Johnny, I snatched the handle and yanked the door closed, just in time as well. I felt the impact smash into the other side. Looking down and knowing the handle would be seized from the other side in a matter of moments, I saw a piece of rebar lying on the floor near me. "Lucas!" I screamed, feeling the handle grabbed and attempt to be opened. Lucas saw what I was looking at and grabbed it, lifting the heavy object up and wedging it against the handle. The door shook violently and I could hear laughing emanating from behind the metal. Evil, insane laughter. I knew that the rebar wouldn't hold the door for long. "Run!" I screamed, grabbing Addie and lifting her into my arms. Lucas didn't need to be told twice. We ran down the maze of dark corridors, frantically searching for the steps leading out. As we ran, I saw things appear in the doorways, shadowy figures, all which stared at us, some with dark, coal-like eyes, others with glowing embers like what I picture how to look like. A few reached out and tried to grab us, but we kept sprinting. I kept seeing more horrific sights, ones which I could not bear to tell you. Behind us, I heard the crash of the operating room door breaking open. As despair began to well up inside me, we turned a corner and saw the concrete stairs which led to our salvation. We took them two at a time, racing back through the ground floor to our broken window entrance. I practically flung Addie out the window before leaping from it myself, Lucas hot on my heels. We didn't turn back. We just ran down the street for my car. That night was 5 years ago now. All three of us piled into my Taurus and sped for the police station. Despite our horror, we still managed to decide that we wouldn't tell about what we had seen. All three of us knew that we would be labeled as nutjobs and likely end up in the Oregon State Hospital. Instead, though, we decided to tell them that our friend told us he was going to break into the hospital tonight, and we were worried about him. We must have looked quite a sight, busting into the police station. They took our case seriously, though, I'm happy to say, and sent a few deputies out. They found nothing, no sign of Johnny, of my dropped camcorder, no sign of anyone. Even his car was gone from where he had parked it. We didn't know what to make of it. It was as if our friend had never been there. The police promised that they would keep an eye out for him, but a part of me knew that they would never find Johnny, or whoever or whatever he was now. Before we each went our separate ways that night, though, the three of us made a vow. We would never speak a word to anyone of what we saw that night. "Let it die along with the building in a few weeks," Addie said, tears running down her face for our lost friend. All of us agreed. We kept in touch the next few weeks, and all three of us went to watch the hospital get torn down a few weeks later. Seeing the building get reduced to rubble seemed to help the others, but for me it just left an empty feeling inside. I couldn't push away the thoughts that my mind whispered to me, telling me all the horror stories that we had heard over the years about the place had been for real, far too real. and we had almost become the final ones. After the demolition, I never really saw either Addie or Lucas again. They both left town as soon as possible, and I simply haven't heard from them since. I don't blame them though. If it weren't for Ruby and my family, I would have left long ago as well. I still have nightmares though, ones which, as I said at the start, wake me up in a sheen of sweat. Of those shadows, of my friend rushing to try and kill us, of running forever through that basement, the laughter getting closer and closer. And now I suppose I should tell you why I've told you all of this, why I'm breaking a vow that I've held for half a decade and change after so long. It's because I bought a newspaper while eating at the diner last week. The front page headline spoke about new doctors and nurses which had come to work at our local hospital, something much needed after a staffing shortage from the pandemic. The front page displayed some of the pictures of the newcomers, and I froze, almost dropping my coffee mug as one face locked in my vision. A face that I hadn't seen in 5 years, smiling wide almost in a familiar way, but not. One which stared out at me with bright green eyes. I felt myself begin to shake violently as I read the caption under his picture. The hospital welcomes Dr. Jonathan Craddock as our new head surgeon. Today's episode is sponsored by Cash App. So I recently met up with some old friends for a night out to catch up and enjoy each other's company. Throughout the night, we stopped at many different restaurants and locations, and when the night was over, everybody owed somebody else money for one thing or another. We tried to use regular cash, but half our friends either didn't have it or didn't have enough to pay each other back. Luckily though, one of our friends recommended Cash App and we all downloaded it and were able to send the money so that everybody was happy and evened up. Cash App is a safe, easy, and fast way to send, receive, and transfer money to family and friends. And it's pretty simple to get started. Just download the app and enter your phone number and you're good to go. Cash App is also very secure. If you're about to send money to a sketchy account, a scam warning pops up letting you know not to send it. For a limited time only, new Cash App users can use our exclusive code to earn some additional cash. For real, there's no catch. Just download Cash App and sign up. Use our exclusive referral code, Mr. Creeps, in your profile. Send $5 to a friend within 14 days and you'll get $10 dropped right into your account. Terms apply. That's money. That's Cash App. I swear to you, man, it's an honest-to-God ghost town just sitting out there. That was the line that hooked us. We had been standing around the pool table in our local bar, playing a few games and downing beers to celebrate the end of the week, when the loud voice of Gerald Wright, a local hunter, filtered over to us, amplified by the sudden web of silence that comes between songs playing over the jukebox. I looked up from the shot that I had been about to take to stare over my shoulder. He was sitting on one of the stools of the bar, talking to another hunter that I didn't know the name of, waving his arms around, a glass of beer precariously sloshing around in one hand. I was out tracking a stellar 4-point buck through the woods, and I looked down the hill to my left, and what do I see sitting in the valley? A ghost town, just sitting silent as a tomb, with the afternoon sunlight glinting off of the roofs and windows. I'm telling you, Mick. He poked his friend in the chest. I've been hunting up there for nearly 20 years, and I've never come across that place. I must have been blind to miss it. He ran a hand over his face, pressing his fingers into his eyes as if to prove his point. I exchanged a look with Carlos across the table, raising an eyebrow and jerking my head behind me. I could see a look of curiosity etched onto his face in the glow of the lights over the pool table. It was one echoed in the third member of our group, Aaron. He held up one finger and set the cue down on the table, turning around and walking to the bar as the silence was broken by a country song coming on the speakers. I held up a hand to signal to the bartender. "Hey, Shelly, can I get one more Corona, please?" I called as she turned her head to me. She nodded and I turned to the two men beside me. "Hey, Jerry, did I just hear you say something about a ghost town?" I asked nonchalantly. The man turned around to regard me with a look of confused irritation, but it melted away when he recognized me. "Oh, how you doing, Terry?" he said, reaching out a meaty hand to shake mine. "Yeah, I was up hunting in the Lincoln Hills, going after what would have made an amazing pair of antlers to mount over my fireplace. And there's, nearest as I can tell, an abandoned, empty ghost town just sitting in a valley below me." He scrunched up his brow and shook his head. The craziest thing, though, place didn't look all that old. I never went down there, but it looked new. He shrugged his shoulders, and as my beer was placed in front of me, I asked one more question as I tossed a crumpled 10 on the bar. "Was this near one of the logging roads?" I nodded. "Yeah, I could see the McKinley logging road off to the right, actually," he said, and then turned to his friend. "Shoot, we should go up there sometime while hunting, Mickey boy." Seeing my exit, I picked up my beer. I slapped Gerald on the shoulder and bid him goodnight, and then I rejoined my friends. "You hear that?" I asked the two of them as I leaned against the pool table and took a swig of my beer. They both nodded. "Heck yeah, man," Carlos said, leaning up next to me. Aaron leaned on his pool cue. "What are you thinking, bro?" he asked. They both stared at me. I'm thinking," I began. "I'm thinking that we got about 5 hours of daylight left before dark." I glanced at my wristwatch. "Actually, 5.5 hours. Why don't we take a trip up there and check this place out for ourselves? Do a little bit of urban exploring." They shared a look between them and then shrugged. "Beats staying around here all night," Aaron said. "Besides, imagine the views that we might get on YouTube for exploring a possibly undiscovered ghost town," Carlos added. This guy had a small but dedicated channel on YouTube where he showed off abandoned towns, mines, and other places, garnering a few thousand subscribers. "Wait a minute though," Aaron interjected. "Jerry said that it was up near McKinley Road. There's absolutely no freaking way my car is going to make it up there, and neither will Carlos's Explorer. Those ruts will tear them both apart." I tilted my head at him and then smiled and rolled my eyes. "Oh, did you forget I've got my K5 back at my place? That thing will eat up those ruts and dips and make it there and back perfectly fine." They exchanged another look and then both split into grins. "Well then what are we still doing here?" Carlos exclaimed, donning the last of his beer and throwing the bottle into a garbage bin. "Let's go." And with that declaration, we filed out of the bar into Carlos's Explorer, and we drove to my house. Sitting in the driveway was my pride and joy, an almost pristine Chevy K5 Blazer. We all piled into the truck, and after making sure we had all the equipment that we might possibly need, we drove through town and onto the logging roads. Many of them hadn't been used in decades, The lack of maintenance on the roads had caused the dirt roads to become pockmarked with ruts and dips, making it look like the acne-filled face of a teenager. Trees stretched over the road, some interlocking with each other like wooden fingers, and they would occasionally scrape against the roof of the truck with a sickening sound as we passed through thick portions. Very quickly, much of the late afternoon sun became blocked by the thick foliage, leaving much of our drive in the shadows. As we drove, I pushed a CD into the player, filling the cabin with the voice of Willie Nelson. I navigated around the dips and dents, occasionally slowing to a crawl through them, and deep puddles where the road had been partially flooded by the previous night's rain. Aaron sat in the passenger seat, a yellowed, old-as-hell map detailing the logging roads in his lap. I had bought it from a garage sale to help find my way around the backwoods when I went off-roading. Okay, if Jerry was right, it should be about 2 miles ahead of us, and if he saw it in a valley, he pointed to a trough detailed by the map. The only place that I could think it would be here, in Barrett Valley. Carlos poked his head between us to look down at the map himself. You ever even hear about an abandoned town out here before? He asked, the question addressed to both of us. We both shook our heads. For the next 10 minutes, the music was the only thing heard besides the rumble of the truck's engine and the scrape of the tree branches. And then it was broken by Carlos, pointing his finger past us and out the window. Look, he said. It would have been so easy to miss, being almost completely overgrown, but he had spotted something. It was an offshoot road, clearly not having been used in even longer than the road that we were on. Hey, good eye, Aaron cried, turning around and slapping him high five. I stared at the road for a moment though. I tilted my head sideways. There was a strange feeling that I was getting from looking at it. I couldn't place it exactly, but it just felt unnatural. Shaking it off, I turned off the radio, and then reached down and shifted the four-wheel drive into low gear. Well, here we go, guys, I said, and then turned slowly onto it. I will forever kick myself in the butt for not paying attention to that feeling. I know now that it was an instinctive warning, one that I failed to heed. It became, if possible, even more slow-going. I could barely see the edges of the road as the bushes had already begun to regrow in the middle of it, a sign that nature had long since begun to reclaim this for itself. I turned on the truck's headlights along with the roof-mounted lights to help see where I was going. For about 10 minutes, that's all that we saw. Unending trees and bushes pressing in on us as though they were trying to trap us in place. And then they began to space out, and the road became visible again. What was strange, though, was that 2 minutes later, it changed from dirt to tarmac. I remember actually feeling so stupefied that I brought the truck to a stop for a minute, staring at the black road with yellow lines down the middle, before snapping myself out of my surprise and shifting back into two-wheel drive and continuing. A minute later, and we rounded the last corner, and we finally saw it. I brought the truck to a stop before a bridge leading into town, and all three of us leaned forward. Carlos whistled. Wow, that's something I didn't expect to see, he breathed. I had to agree with him. I hadn't asked Gerald for details, but I never in a million years would have thought in my head of this. This place, it was not even close to being small. It took up the entire length and width of the entire valley, and stretching out before us were rows upon rows of streets. Houses sitting behind long, overgrown lawns that looked like small jungles. Off to the left was what had to be the downtown. At least 4 or 5 blocks were taken up by commercial buildings, along with what looked like a cinema and a community center. At the far end of the town, we could see the faded white church spire rising above everything else. "My God," Aaron mumbled. We all turned to look at each other and then laughed softly. "We just hit the jackpot," Carlos exclaimed, reaching into his bag and pulling out his camcorder, beginning to film through the windshield. "You're not kidding," I added, and then I looked to my right. "Look," I said, pointing. Set right after the bridge was a medium-sized metal sign. In white letters that stood out from the blue background, it proclaimed, "Welcome to McCamey. Population 12,463. "Dude," Aaron said as Carlos leaned forward to zoom in on the sign. "Not even our town has a population of 12,000 people." He looked around. "And this place looks too new to be from any more than 30 years ago." He was right. The design of the houses and the commercial buildings looked far newer than any abandoned town that I had stumbled across. "So why do you think it's empty, and we've never heard about it before?" I asked, turning around in my seat to look at Carlos. He shrugged, running his free hand through his short brown hair. Maybe it was a planned expansion of the area that never came to be. Maybe it was meant to be a new development, but the company or the people financing it ran out of money, and they had to abandon it." The idea somewhat soothed the eerie feeling that gazing over the town had filled me with. Yeah, Carlos is right, he has to be. Just some rich idiot's pet project that bankrupted him. Repeating that thought in my mind, I slowly pressed on the gas and we crossed over the bridge, which rattled slightly into town. Now, if you, during the pandemic, ever got to see how eerie it looked, to see what should have been a populated area completely deserted, take that and amplify it 10 times, and you'll have an idea of how it felt to drive through McCamey. The noise of the truck's engine and exhaust bounced and echoed off the buildings and surrounding hills back at us through the open windows that we had lowered to let the cool air inside, and for Carlos to film. We crisscrossed through some of the residential streets at first, looking to see if we could see any abandoned cars parked in the driveways or anything of the sort, but we never saw anything. All we saw were the houses, all which seemed to have a relatively modern design to them, but aged by the elements, paint ripped off the sides and gutters hanging precariously off the roofs. More than a few had their windows broken. I noticed that some were broken inwards instead of out, as I saw no broken glass among the tall grass and weed-infested front yards. Then we stopped at the church. Its white paint was fading as well, and the front door stood wide open. We could see inside where, visible in the slight gloom, many of the pews had been upturned. The pulpit had been destroyed, likely by vandals, I thought. And the statue of Jesus crucified on the cross was barely visible behind its remains, having been knocked to the floor. I shifted my eyes from the mess inside to the announcement sign at the end of the walkway leading up to it. The glass had fogged up with many years of disuse, but I could just barely make out the white letters which had been set up behind it. "Save yourself from the pestilence. God is here to offer you salvation." I couldn't understand why, but I unwillingly shuddered reading it, a chill shooting up my back. The other guys had noticed it as well. What the heck did they mean by the pestilence? Carlos asked, zooming in on the sign. Heck if I know, I said, for some reason unwilling to look back into the church. The shuddering feeling came over me again, to use the old phrase. It felt as though someone had just walked over my own grave. Aaron looked at his phone. Well, we have about 2 hours of daylight remaining. You want to go and check out the downtown? I let out a deep breath I hadn't realized I had been holding and then nodded. Yeah, why don't we go check that out and then get back to town? I honestly don't want to drive those logging roads after dark. They accepted my answer and turned away, but I knew I had been full of crap. It had nothing to do with the logging roads. It was here that I didn't want to be when the sun went down. I put the truck in drive and with just a little too much of a push on the gas, pulled away from the curb. We drove back down the main boulevard towards the downtown area. About 5 minutes later, we had pulled into a faded parking space in the downtown square. Dirty windows concealed the surrounding buildings' interiors, but the signs above, as broken and as dirty as they were, still showed what they had been. Just from our space, we saw a laundromat, a library, the town newspaper building, what looked like a video rental store, a repair garage, a convenience store, and at the end of the square, the community center. Hold on, I said, shutting the truck off and pulling the key from the ignition. Using another key on the ring, I unlocked the center console and opening it, pulled a small black case from it. I opened it, revealing a silver handgun. Well, dang, Aaron exclaimed. I snorted and then held it up as I picked up 2 magazines from the box as well. Beretta 92 FS, Enox, and don't leave home without it. I pulled a holster from under the driver's seat and, with a little wiggling, hooked it onto my thigh. I slapped a magazine into the gun and then clipped it into the holster, stuffing the extra one into my shirt pocket. Not taking any chances, are you? Carlos asked, lowering his camera. I shook my head. Not around here where there's a large wolf population. Last thing that I need is to explore this place and get ambushed by a wolf or a cougar, which took up residence somewhere. Kicking open my door, I hopped out and made my way to the back of the truck as the others followed. I opened the tailgate and reached inside, pulling out another case, inside which revealed a hunting rifle, along with 3 high-powered flashlights. I handed Aaron the rifle along with some extra ammo, and then I passed out the flashlights. Just in case, I said to Carlos, who looked perplexed at the firearms. The guy's only lived out here 5 years. He doesn't know why it's a good idea to carry out here all the time, especially after the Connors incident. I winced as I recalled the wolf attack on the now dead hiker. So, where do you want to start? I asked, glancing at my watch. We've got about an hour or so to check this out, if we want to get back before nightfall. The 2 of them looked around, Carlos already holding up his camera. Well, I was thinking of starting with the library, and then making my way to the newspaper building. I could hope to find out when this place was abandoned from there, if this place ever even had residents. I scrunched up my mouth a bit. I loved libraries, but I spent enough time in one in a living town, let alone one long since deserted. I glanced around. Okay, here's what we'll do then. You 2 go check out the library and the newspaper office. Watch your backs and don't get separated. I motioned down the other end of the square. I'm gonna go check out the garage and the video store. Carlos gave me a worried look. How are we gonna stay in touch, though, in case anything happens? I reached back into the truck before slamming the tailgate closed. I handed Carlos a radio. The second, I clipped onto my belt before turning it on. "That's how," I said before tapping it. "Keep it tuned to channel 4, that's what I'm on." They nodded, and after a final exchange of "be safe," we parted ways. I watched them walk across the road and climb the steps to the massive wooden front doors of the library, and then began walking down the middle of the road after they slipped inside. Now that I was alone, the town seemed to have an even more eerie feeling to it. This place doesn't feel like one that was built and then just abandoned. I thought to myself as my boots crunched over dead leaves which had accumulated on the asphalt, listening to the wind whistle and my footfalls echo. It almost feels more like it had been lived in first, and now it's just dead. I couldn't put my finger on why it felt that way. It just was almost an intuition. As I headed for the garage, the wind whistled around me, and I felt a shudder go up my spine. I stopped, and then turned and looked at the windows of what had to be apartments over the stores. They stood dark and unmoving, no shapes in them. I almost wished there had been figures in them. It would have been far less creepy. Shaking my head, I turned back and walked a little faster until I reached the garage. Both bay doors were shut and the windows on the top of them were too high to see through. So I headed for the cracked glass door that customers would enter. Flicking on my flashlight, I pulled on the handle. It opened after a moment of tugging, causing a bell hooked on the inside of it to ring. I stepped inside and looked around as it shut, the sound echoing in the stillness. Directly in front of me stood the main counter where the mechanic would greet customers. Sitting atop it was the monitor for a computer, with a rack of part boxes and oil behind it. Shelves lined one side of the room with bottles and boxes that had their labels long since rotted or peeled away, as did posters on the wall. Wait a minute. I turned my flashlight back to the counter. I focused the beam on the computer monitor. What? I shook my head slightly, but I wasn't seeing things. It was a flat-screen monitor, not one of the boxy units from the 80s, 90s, or even the early 2000s. How the heck did that get here? I crossed the floor and vaulted over the counter, turning to look at it. It was indeed a newer model flat-screen monitor, the Dell logo still visible beneath the layer of dust covering it. I couldn't see the tower, only the monitor and the keyboard. Shaking my head, I turned away and stepped through the door leading to the repair bays. I shone the light around the dark, expansive room. A beam glinted off something metal in the far bay. It was a vehicle sitting up on the far left. I crossed the room quickly, stepping over spilled oil and other fluids until I stood just below it. I felt an even larger sense of confusion and shock course through me as I stared up. What is that? I wasn't looking at an older car or a truck. I was looking at a Cadillac Escalade, and not one of the older ones either. It was one of the brand new Escalades, the generation that had only been out for 2 or 3 years now, but it looks much older than that. The undercarriage was coated with what had to be years, if not decades of rust and corrosion, and the paint on the side was faded, as though it had sat outside in the beating sun for countless summers. Feeling a massive sense of unease sweep over me, I stepped around the back and aimed the light at the license plate on the back of the SUV. The sticker on the plate indicating what year it would expire was illegible. It had faded too much to read. The feeling of insects crawling under my skin increases, and I turned and quickly left the garage, banging open the door a little too hard and causing the bell to jangle loudly. The sound ricocheted off the buildings like a gunshot, and I froze for some reason, holding my breath. Another shiver went up my spine and I looked around, but the streets remained empty. Reaching down, I pulled the radio from my belt and pressed the transmit button. "Hey guys," I called, my voice shaking slightly. There's something really rather weird going on here." The radio crackled with static.
Yeah, you're telling me.
I heard Carlos's voice filter through.
There's what looks like newer computers at the circulation desk for the library. And some of the books we found, neither of us had ever heard before in our lives.
I heard him laugh, still holding down the button.
This place is wild. I've gotten some great footage of it all.
I spoke into the radio, willing my voice to stay level. That's great, man. You guys ready to get out of here now?" The answer I received was not the answer that I wanted.
Oh, just give us 5 more minutes, Terry. Please, we just entered the newspaper office and this is our last stop.
I wanted to tell him to take that newspaper office and shove him up his, but I couldn't. He was my friend and he sounded too excited. "Just give them 5 and then you can be gone." I thumbed the radio. "All right, but only 5 minutes, okay?"
Copy that.
I heard Carlos say. But behind that, I heard something else. I heard what must have been Aaron coughing heavily. "Hey Aaron, you alright?" I asked.
Oh, yeah, he's fine. We must have kicked up something from the library floor.
He said and then clicked off the radio. Well, that's great, I thought, sighing and looking around again. A cold gust of wind hit me and I pulled up my collar to shield myself. I hate how this place feels so dead. Not wanting to remain out in the open, I strode quickly back across the square to the video store. Well, I wanted to see in here anyways. Looking up, I could barely make out the name. Nostalgia Video. Pulling open the dirt-smeared door, I stepped inside and shone my light around. There was a circular desk at the front of the store, with aisles stretching out behind it. I began to walk towards it when the light reflected off of something stuck on the inside of the windows. I turned and saw that it had reflected off dust and dirt-covered movie posters. Maybe see what movies they were advertising last. Trying to take my mind off the sense of uneasiness slowly being replaced with dread, I crossed the room and, using the sleeve of my coat, wiped away enough so that one could be read. Stepping back, I stopped, trying to process what I was looking at. I stared in confusion. The nun, too. I blinked rapidly, biting my lower lip. I'm a huge movie buff, and I knew for a fact that there was no movie which had come out in the last few decades called that. There was a movie called The Nun which had come out in 2018, and a sequel coming out later this year. But no, this doesn't make any sense. I looked down at the bottom of the poster at the smaller lettering. 20th Anniversary Re-Release. Rent it now on Blu-ray and virtual video disc. My jaw dropped open. What is going on? I whispered. Okay, I think it's time to get out of here, now. Turning and feeling as though I had just stepped off of a roller coaster, I stumbled out of the store and into the fading light. I put my hand to my head and took in deep breaths, trying to steady myself. That's when the door to the newspaper office across the street burst open. I snapped up, yanking the pistol out of its holster on instinct. But I stopped when I saw Aaron and Carlos dashing down the steps. The looks on their faces made whatever I was about to say die in my throat. Both of them had pale and terrified expressions on their faces, as though they had just seen a monster or a murder. Carlos had something clenched in one hand. "Guys, what the?" I began, but they tore past me, both screaming for me to follow them. Not knowing what else to do, I sprinted to catch up as they ran towards the community center. They reached the hulking building and slammed into each other as they tore for the handle of the fading yellow doors. "Move! Let me open it!" I heard Aaron shout. You get out of the way!" Carlos screamed back at him. I was about to step in and pull them both back when one of them, I'm not sure which, managed to tear the right door open. I reached around them and pulled the left door back, staring inside. And Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, do I wish I hadn't. The inside of the community center was one giant room, a bubble glass roof which had long since broken, providing light inside. Broken glass and leaves littered the floor underneath it, and tables had been shoved all to one side of the room. It was drenched in gloom, but not gloomy enough to hide what lay inside, and our flashlight beams made sure to leave no doubt. The entire town's population looked to be here. They were scattered across the floor with many in the center huddling around each other. As messed up as it was, I almost wished they had been rotting corpses. It would have shown that they hadn't been dead for long, but they weren't. They were all skeletons. I could see the bones of families huddling together with tattered, torn clothes on, parents holding their children. What had to be couples embraced each other, while still others curled up alone, hugging their own knees. The worst ones were the few who laid slumped against the walls, a pistol in their hands and what appeared to be a bullet hole in the back of their skulls. I began shaking, feeling as though someone were pouring ice water down my back nonstop. And behind them was a white banner, one which read in black letters, "Emergency Shelter." I looked from the horrifying sight to Carlos, my eyes wide and my breath coming in ragged gasps, trying to find something. I don't know what in his gaze. He looked at me, his eyes as wide as mine, and wordlessly handed me what he had been holding. As I stared at it, I felt my jaw drop open, and the flashlight that I had been holding fell from my hand, smashing and breaking on the pavement. For a moment longer, we all just looked at each other, the only sound heard being the ghostly whistle of the wind. And then we ran. We all dashed across the square, the sound of our feet echoing in the deathly stillness, reaching the truck and leapt inside. Jamming the key into the ignition, I slammed on the gas, almost flipping the truck from how sharply I turned the wheel. I swerved onto the road leading out of town, sending it airborne over the bridge before crashing back down in a shower of sparks. "My camera!" Carlos cried suddenly, looking behind him, but there was no way that I was going back for it. I kept my foot down, smashing through the bushes and trees until we came to the logging road, and then I turned onto it and, not caring about my truck at all, flew down it back to town. As soon as we had made it back, I immediately drove to the police station. I must have looked like an absolute madman bursting through the doors, but luckily the sheriff knew me and didn't pull his gun on me. Stammering, almost blubbering, I managed to get out what I could. I knew I sounded absolutely insane, but I needed to tell him. I had to. I could tell they didn't believe a word that I said, but even still, they still sent a few deputies up into the hills with their off-road cruiser to investigate. When they came back, they shrugged their shoulders at me. "There's nothing up there, Terry," one told me. "Nothing but an empty valley." I wanted to press, but I let it go. They had just assumed that we had had one too many drinks, maybe even eaten some mushrooms, and ended up seeing things. In the back of my mind, I knew they would never find anything, even though I had wanted them to. There was a reason for it. The object that Carlos had handed me, which I had suddenly dropped as I ran, it had been a yellowed newspaper. The headline read, "National death toll rises to 190 million as president declares martial law." But that wasn't what cut through me like a knife, making me feel as though all I knew and believed about reality was crashing down around me. It was the date at the top of the paper. July 22nd, 2047. That was over a year ago. When they had come back and told us that they found nothing, the three of us made a pact, vowing to never speak again about what we had seen. We all felt that it would be better that way. So why, after all this time, am I breaking it? Why am I posting my experience here and telling all of you when I've spent months trying to drown myself in booze in an attempt to forget? My guess as a warning, for two reasons. The first being thanks to this site. I just recently learned about the concept of a time slip, an overlap of the past or future and the present. And second, because last week there was a town hall meeting. It was to introduce us residents to a wealthy landowner who had just moved here. I went out of sheer curiosity. He spoke about how he had purchased a large slice of former logging land to develop a new town, one to attract more people to our area. He even showed artist renditions of what he wanted it to look like. When I saw them, I felt myself begin to violently shake, as the dread I felt that day returned in spades. At the top of the concept art was the name he intended to choose for it. Take 3 guesses what it was. I squint through the snowstorm and look down to my watch, raising it a little closer to my face for a better look, but I don't know why I bother. It's just a force of habit, I guess. The watch is broken. It's always broken. I should replace it really, after all. I mean, who wears a broken watch? I just can't bring myself to do so. It was passed down from my granddad through my brother. 3 different repair places have all turned me away and said that it was impossible to fix. Too old, they say. Sounds like bullshit to me, but hey, what do I know? I shiver and my gaze returns to my surroundings. I draw my coat a little tighter around my body. The storm rages. All around is snow and an endless world of white, illuminated through the dark with the mist-blurred orange of the endless, dutiful street lamps. I carry on trudging along my way. At the beginning of the night, right after the bus had dropped me off, I considered waiting in the spot that I was left behind, waiting for the driver to realize his error and to come back and get me. But it was just too cold for standing around, and so I started walking down the road, following the bus's direction of travel. It's been a few hours now and the bus never came back. So yeah. Hey, my name is Sam, by the way. I'm 15 and I'm lost in the snow. I didn't realize the mistake until the bus had driven away. The storm beyond the windows was too thick, and hell, why shouldn't it be dropping me off in the right place? It's always the right place. Never, never am I dropped off in the wrong location. Except for this evening, it would seem. This, the evening of the storm. I grimace and close my eyes tight shut against a sudden barreling gust of icy wind. I have no idea where I am. Maps isn't working, but I should be okay. I'll just keep following the road until I find something that I recognize. Soon, for sure. And so I walk. I walk and I walk. It's maybe 3 or so hours or so until I really start to feel the first stages of panic settling in. The air only feels like it's getting colder and colder, sharper and sharper. There's no one at home right now to come and collect me, so what am I supposed to do? I check my phone again as the battery steadily drops. The device shakes in my shivering hand. Come on, I mutter, grimacing, looking around for a countless time. Come on, give me something here, something. And if I squint just right, there through the blizzard is a different kind of light. Faint at first and paler than the orange of the street lamps, but it's different enough. Distinct. Yellow and soft, spilling through the windows of a long building, a little ways back from the road. It could be an office block or something. I decide to go for it, turning away from the road and trudging a path through the fallen snow to the building's entrance. As I approach, I realize that the building isn't an office at all. In fact, it's a school. Not mine nor one that I recognize, but a school nonetheless. Damn, it's probably locked up tight. I think aloud as I reach the front doors, but to my surprise, they push right open at my touch, and so I head on inside. It's not very warm in here, but hey, at least it's out of the wind and the snow. My footsteps echo on the hard floor. The door closes with a thunk behind me and the sounds of the weather are dulled. I draw down my hood and allow myself a breath. It fogs and clouds over into the surrounding air and I look around. The school's main lobby is illuminated like two of its offshooting corridors, with a faint, warning yellow. The light in corridor 3 is flickering silently, and the light of the fourth is non-existent. Dead dark and a picture of shadows. An unfamiliar emblem is emblazoned on the wall to my left, above the motto, Ad mortem, ad lucem. A disturbing sense of unease passes through me. The light flickers and the air chills. I try to clear my throat, but the noise sounds distant and far away. My breath clouds around my face, and a shadow, vast and long, swims into my field of vision across the walls and the floor. Slowly, as if beneath a body of water, I turn my head. I turn to look behind me and stagger away in horror, as fast as this newly thickened air will allow. Beyond the glass of the entrance doors and drifting through the snow and shadows in the air is a living nightmare. What appears bizarrely to be something akin to an enormous eel, black and creeping, slithering its way through the evening air as if the storm were the bottom of the sea. Its jaw cracks open a slither, and as it passes me by, I see its teeth, gray and spiked and beyond count. Its eye fixes upon mine. It glows like the lights of the school, yellow, only brighter. The pupil of this great eel is rectangular, in the manner of a goat's, and deeper and darker and blacker than anything that I've ever seen. To meet this thing's stare is to look back into the eye of the abyss. It drifts past the door at a right angle, its long and snake-like body following on behind, and I tear away my eyes. Shit. I stutter uselessly. No way, and I turn tail and I run, away from the doors and deeper into the building. I pass by a window to my right and I see another dark shadow. A second of these creatures perhaps, as it swims through the snowstorm outside. What the hell is happening? I shout out loud, hoping to break through the sounds of my breathing and my beating heart, as I tear down the hall and around, corner after corner. I found myself drawn to an ascending staircase, and so up I climb after a quick check over my shoulder. I don't think that the creatures can enter into the building, but the flickering lights and the dancing shadows are playing tricks on me. I climb as quickly as I am able and I crash down into the nearest classroom, fumbling and stumbling amongst the chairs and landing on the ground in the dark. I catch my breath. The only light comes through the glass in the classroom door and through the long, wide window beside me. The blinds are open and the snowstorm rages beyond. The light of a street lamp, fainting as far as it is, filters calmly inside. It illuminates the tips and edges of the chairs and tables. It casts a glossy, reflective shine across the artwork, presumably drawn and painted by students hung on the walls, and across the hair of a girl resting casually on the counter. "Hey," she says with a smile, and I recoil in surprise. "What the? Who are you?" I ask, stuttering. "Oh, sorry about the eels. They're here for me, not for you, but best to avoid them all the same," she says, dodging the question and brushing a strand of hair from her face. She tucks it behind her ear. I realize that at some point I bitten my lip and it throbs painfully. I rub a thumb across the freshly forming bump. "What's your name?" I ask. "What are you doing here? Are we safe?" She shrugs. "I'm pretty safe, I guess, for now." She glances to the window and gently kicks her heel against the counter. "My name's Ellie. I'm just hanging out. Do you have a name?" "Of course I have a name," I reply, irritated. "It's Sam. Is this your school then?" She shrugs again. Kinda. I glance from the door to the window and clamber up to my feet, taking a seat opposite her on a nearby desk. My dumb teenage brain tries to work out if she's cute or not. She kind of is, I guess. More importantly, though, I'm also trying to decide if her presence here has heightened or lessened the imminent danger. "Could you just stop screwing around for a second? What the hell is going on? Eels. Massive eels in the snow. They aren't actually eels, obviously. That would be moronic. They just look like them. So what are they then? Why are they hanging around here, around your school?" She shifts and brings a hand up to her shoulder to rub her arm. "Oh, don't worry about it. It's not really your problem." "Not my problem," I repeat, eyebrows furrowed. Well, I would disagree a little." I throw out my hands. "What is happening?" Her tone shifts to a defensive one. "Geez, if you're gonna be a little whiny baby, you can just go, okay? I didn't ask for you to come here. I already told you they aren't here for you. They're here for me." Ellie crosses her arm and stands up from the desk, turning and walking away to face the window. A whiny little baby. Oof. We both watch as the enormous shadow of one of the creatures drifts past the glass, temporarily throwing a coat of shadow across the room. The snow falls. Diplomacy, Sam. I rub my chin. I want answers here. "All right," I say. "I'm sorry." She turns back to look at me and I speak on. "I'm just freaked out, okay? You seem a lot more in control of the situation. I would like to be at the same level that you are." I hold out my hand and offer for her to shake it, a peace offering, and my grandfather's watch catches in the light. Her eyes dart to it at once and her expression changes completely. She squeals a little and puts her face right up close to it. "That is gorgeous," she says. "Oh my goodness, where did you get this from? Can I see it?" Why is she not concerned by the monsters outside? Yeah, sure, here, take it." I unclasp it from my wrist and make to hand it to her, but she takes a sudden step back. "Oh, no, it's okay. If you could just set it down on the table, that would be great." I pause. "You want me to just set it down on the table?" She nods and smiles pleasantly. "Yes, please." "Right." I do as she asks, and instead of passing the watch directly to her, I instead place it gently down on the nearest desk. She rests on the surface, one hand on either side of the timepiece, and gets her face really close to it. "You were wearing it on the wrong wrist, you know," she says as she studies the thing. I shrug again, irritated. "Well, I'm left-handed, so..." "And it doesn't work," she asked me. "It's broken. Why would you wear a broken watch?" "Even a broken watch is right twice a day," I reply dryly, and to my surprise, she actually laughs. I chuckle too, a little awkwardly in surprise. "Sure," she says, sticking out her tongue. The shadow of the eel drifts past the window. Again, we're casting a shadow as it passes us by, swimming through the rush of the storm. "Please just tell me what's going on, all right?" I say to her, my temporarily misplaced fear returning at full force. "Come on, don't play around with me. Are we actually in danger? I certainly feel in danger." She ignores me, squinting carefully at the broken watch, muttering quietly in thought to herself. Time. It's such a funny thing. "Hey, enough is enough," and I step forward. I reach out to grab her arm, but in my attempt, my hand passes right through her skin. Her skin and body and everything else. She is massless, and I watch as my hand passes effortlessly right through her arm, translucent and flickering. After a moment of processing, I take a silent and horrified step back. She sighs and straightens, brushing that same strand of hair behind her ear. She no longer looks as solid or indeed as grounded as she did mere moments ago. "I'm sorry that you ended up here tonight," she says quietly. The wind whistles beyond the walls, and the snowstorm rages. "So, what's your deal, Ellie?" I ask, mouth dry. "Are you a ghost or something?" It's meant as a half-joke, really, but the question hangs in the air. She wrinkles her nose and then shrugs. I laugh nervously. "So, are you a ghost then?" "I'm not alive anymore, if that's what you're wondering." She nods to the window. "That's why the creatures are after me. I'm not still supposed to be here." "Oh," I reply simply. For some reason, I see in my mind's eye a rough bird's eye view of the school, piled high with and surrounded by snow. Faint yellow light shining from the windows in the storm as the eels circled around and around. I could run. I could just turn around and run back the way that I came, back into the storm. Though I'm not convinced by what she tells me. The idea that the eels will just ignore me is a nice one, but I don't know how true it is. I'm not sure that she really knows either. "How did you die?" I ask a little awkwardly, if you don't mind me asking. She doesn't reply at first. She only goes back to studying the watch. She holds her hands above it, and then I observe in awe as she draws them suddenly back, and a glowing representation of the watch's inner mechanisms are blown up and fixed in place in the air just above us. Cogs and gears all stilled. "Whoa," I murmur, and she smiles. And then she sighs and the smile escapes from her face. "You can see for yourself if you really want to," she says, pointing to the mirror in the corner of the room. "Though it's not a fun story, so be warned." Cautiously, I make to head over, and she seems to have some second thoughts. "Wait," she says suddenly. "Actually, I don't think that's much of a good idea. You should leave, honestly. The creatures won't hurt you, I'm just waiting here. Seriously, you don't have to look." But it's too late now. My curiosity is piqued, and it might as well count towards my safety and survival, so I turn back to the mirror and I stride towards it. "Wait!" she shouts as I put out a hand, and it passes through the surface of the mirror like water. All around me at once is mist, swirling glass-like mist and distorted cries from behind. Ellie is calling back to me, but it's too late. I have stepped through and now I'm falling. There is nothing to keep me anchored. and I land with a thump and a groan at the entrance to the school. I am outside, but there is no snow right now. I jump to my feet and receive some strange looks as I'm surrounded by kids, all roughly my own age, though I don't recognize a single person by sight. I glance back to the building. It's very different in the pale gray light of this particular overcast morning, but it's the same school all right. But when? I'm an avid reader, and it always infuriates me when I'm forced to spend paragraph after paragraph and page after page reading through the main characters gaping and gawking in narrow-minded disbelief. So I swore to myself once many years ago that if I ever found myself in an unlikely and unpredictable situation, that I would do my best to just roll with it, to take stock and act as logically as I am able. So I take off my coat and I wrap it around my waist. I smooth back some of the ruffles in my hair, and I do my best to uphold that promise. I take a quick look behind me, but naturally any evidence of a mirror or any kind of ethereal doorway has vanished. Very well. I turn back to the entrance doors to the school and I join my apparent peers, climbing the steps and heading on inside. The kids all around me are giving me strange looks, and I am at once incredibly self-conscious. Who's the new kid? I hear one girl whisper to another. I glance to my left at the school's logo. Ad Maloria, ad Lusam. I wonder for the second time what it might mean. And nothing probably. Schools around here love their Latin mottos. Around where, Sam? Where the hell even are you? I reach down to my pocket for my phone, a renewed chance to check maps, perhaps, but my pockets are empty. You can't take anything with you, comes the voice of Ellie from above and all around me, and I swivel on the spot, staring up at the ceiling. Hey, where are you? I call out, and the conversations around me fall to a hush, and then change to stifled laughter. Who the hell is this guy talking to? I flush and make to stride down one of the school's corridors, bumping hard into a girl in a bright purple coat as I do so, knocking her books to the floor. She looks up at me and flushes in turn, brow furrowed. And it's her. It's Ellie. Ellie, I say. Help me out of here, please. At least a little clue would be nice. She stares at me, expression uncertain. And then after a pause, sorry, do I know you? I turn my head. It's Sam. We were speaking just now. You called out to me. She shakes her head, maintaining eye contact. No, sorry. I don't remember you. I'm sorry. Get a grip, Sam. Think logically. Right, I manage. Sorry. Here, let me help you with your stuff. I crouch down to the ground to collect her books. 2 science books and a purple personal journal of some kind. It's fallen open to a page with the header, Last Day. Beneath is a list of stuff. I manage to read a couple of the items in confusion before she snatches it out of my hand. Apologize to Mrs. Reeves. Clear out locker. I look up at her. What does last day mean? I have to go, she replies quickly, stuffing her things into her bag and hurrying away into the crowds. Hey, I call after her. Wait up, come back. But she does not. Holy shit, I mutter to myself, rubbing a hand across my forehead. Language, young man, comes the sharp voice of a teacher behind me. I turn to him. Oh, sorry. He squints down at me. Do I know you, lad? No, I'm new. Right, well, you'll be expected in registration then, won't you? What's your name? I give it, and the teacher is, of course, unable to find me in the records at the desk. Well, he says, just spend the morning with Mrs. Reeves. Your timetable should largely follow that of the other students. Do you know if you're in history or geography? History. I lie and the teacher nods. I'll have a schedule printed for you. Room 8G for now though, Sam. And don't let me catch you swearing again. Right, yeah, sorry sir, gotcha. I nod and take a quick leave, running the great barrels of new information through my head as I walk, trying my best to process, to act soundly. Something rumbles in the distance. I swear that I can see a glimpse of a shadow pass me by, but when I turn to look for the shadow's source, there's nothing there, nor do any of the other kids seem to notice. I swallow anxiously. Control your fear, learn what's going on, and improvise. I have my suspicions already, but it would be good to get confirmation. I follow the letters and numbers written on the doors until I find classroom 8G, whereupon I knock and push through into the room, instantly awkward and aware of every movement of my body, as all the eyes of the kids behind the desks shift to mine at once. "And who might you be?" the teacher asks, looking down her glasses at me. My eyes dart from her to the kids in the class, to a girl sitting by herself near the back. "Ellie," I blurt out without thinking, to an eruption of laughter from the room. Ellie herself flushes a deep color and looks down to the desk. Mrs. Reeves looks between us and sighs. "I find that unlikely, young man. Your name, please." "Oh, sorry, it's Sam." "Well, Sam, you may as well take the seat next to Ellie for now, since you seem to know her already." As I walk the length of the room and settle into the seat, the whispers and murmurs and giggles rise up almost immediately. Ellie shoots me a dirty look. "What the hell did you do that for?" She hisses at me as I sit down. "Sorry," I say back. "It was an accident. I'm under a lot of stress, okay?" "Yeah, well, you're not the only one," she mutters under her breath. There's a strained pause. I think of Ellie the ghost that I met not an hour or so ago, of the journal. Last day. "Ellie," I begin softly. "How do I phrase this? Are you planning on this being your last day?" "What? Are you planning to kill yourself?" She swivels to stare right at me. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she hisses, just a little too loudly. "Ellie!" Mrs. Reeves calls from the front, interrupting her reading of register. Ellie gives her an apologetic look and then turns right back to me. "Who the hell are you? What are you doing here, Sam?" The exact same questions that I was asking her a few moments ago. I asked first, Are you or are you not planning to kill yourself?" She chews her cheek and looks away. "No, I'm not." "I don't believe you," I say to her. "It doesn't matter if you don't believe me. Just do me a favor and get lost, okay?" To this, I say nothing though. A few seconds later, she turns back to me, eyes still downcast. "Sorry, I didn't mean that. It's been a tough few days." "Sure, it's okay." We sit together and yet a chasm apart. The bell rings to begin the day, and much to Ellie's annoyance, I spend much of it trailing her around. I'm forced away from her by way of various seating plans and the like. Some kids try to introduce themselves to me and I ignore them. A little rude perhaps, but I have priorities here. I'm trying to work out the lay of the land. Ellie rejects and pushes back all my attempts to broach conversation. I can tell that she's curious about me, but it isn't enough to stop her from keeping me at arm's length. She escapes me through the crowds completely at lunch and disappears entirely for the lesson immediately after. And then in the final period, I am witness to an excruciatingly cringy display of her public speaking, as she stammers and fumbles for a painfully long time through an extract of Romeo and Juliet. It's so bad, in fact, that I forget why I'm here for a moment and struggle to hold back giggles. Ellie seems less than amused, and doesn't even look back when I call out after her at the day's end. 2:59 p.m. read the clock on the lobby wall as I left through the doors. At this time of year, the sun had already begun to sink low into the sky. I was walking behind her and we were leaving the school behind. They let us go a couple of minutes early. A gust of wind ruffles through my hair and rustles the collar of my coat. My mood suddenly drops and I'm met with a stomach-churning sensation that I'm running out of time. Time. Ellie, I call out, though it's becoming, I find, harder to speak. I'm forced to project, to raise my voice beyond a whisper. And there's that sensation again, the feeling of walking through water. I struggle against the winds and the thickness of its air. The lowering sun glints orange and sends Ellie's shadow long and dark back towards me as the gap between us widens. And all around are the creatures now. Slow and rumbling, they push aside the air at various heights. They look down to the girl, hungry and eyes aglow. One looks to me as it rises up and up into the air. Its jaw distends, and the mists shimmer in fog from behind and beside. I am lost in the cloud as I call out for her, but my voice does not work the way that it's supposed to. My sight is obscured and I close my eyes tight shut. But when I open them again, I am stumbling to the floor of the classroom. I land with a clatter and a grunt and a groan. Ugh. I clamber unsteadily to my feet and try to regather my bearings. Behind me is the mirror, softly shimmering as before. My disheveled reflection looks back at me. The classroom is just as I had left it, I think, though it's darker now. We are well into the night. Ellie, or the ghost Ellie, is humming softly to herself, still studying the projection that she has made of my watch's inner mechanisms. She raises her hands and makes little circles with her fingers, and as she does so, the projected gears and cogs turn with them. They slide into new places as she ponders and tweaks. "Have fun?" she asks, without looking over to me. "No, not really." She smirks humorlessly. "I'm sorry that I was in better company." "Ellie." I step close to the girl and I sit down on the desk right by her as the snow rages beyond the window. "What happened here?" "Look, if you haven't worked it out by now, then you're never really going to get it, Sam," she says. "So you killed yourself and then, is that it? That was your last day? And you go home from school and take your own life?" "Take my own life. So dramatic," she murmurs. But still, she doesn't look directly at me. One of the monstrous eels shivers its way past the window, and this time I swear that I can hear a deep, low hiss to accompany its subtle rumbling. I swallow down a mouthful of fear and I return to awareness of how cold the room is. My breath clouds. Was it quite this cold before? The mood shifts. I've never been much good with stuff like this. It's just as well that I can't physically touch Ellie. Otherwise, I would be trying to work out whether I should awkwardly take her hand or something. "Can I ask why?" I say softly, and she finally stops doing what she's doing and turns to look at me. She chews her tongue for a moment and then shrugs and brushes that loose strand of hair behind her ear. "I was sad, I guess, and there was no real chance for me to be less sad going forwards. There was just a lot of stress going on in my life. It was easier for everyone if I wasn't there." "Bullshit," I reply, and she stares at me. "Excuse me?" I said that's bullshit, and suddenly I'm angry. How could you do that to yourself? How could you do something like that? What is wrong with you? Look at all that you've done. You're trapped here and you've messed up the cosmic order of the universe or something. I don't know. Why the hell do you even care so much?" She shouts back at me. "Why are you even still here? Just go, Sam. It's too late now anyway, it's dawn." I shoot a look back behind me, tensed and determined. "Yeah, we'll see about that." I mutter and I turn my back to her. "Sam, stop," she shouts, as I leave her behind for the second time. As I stride right on back towards the mirror, the shadows of the night blown out, billowing behind me. I step forwards and through the shimmering gates of the mirror. I am again surrounded by mist and swirling crystalline smoke, and again my footing is lost. I grit my teeth through the fall and stumble to my side as the hard, cold ground finds its place beneath my feet. I knock into a boy beside me and he grunts with surprise. "Hey, watch where you're going, all right." "Sorry," I tell him, straightening and putting out an apologetic hand as I check to confirm my surroundings. The sun's position has changed back to the way that it was, back to morning. The school stands before me and the same roster of faces trudge their way up the steps to the entrance. I glance down to my watch hand to confirm the time, to remember that A, I left my watch behind with Ellie, and B, the watch doesn't work anyway. Fine. It makes no matter. It's the dawn of the day, the same day. Final day. I set my jaw and I march my way up the steps and into the building. Looking around for her, I bumped into her just over there, was it? "Why are you doing this, Sam?" comes her voice from above and all around. But I have the good sense not to shout out into the lobby this time in my response. I keep my head down and my mouth shut. And sure enough, there she is, holding her books to her chest as she rounds the corner and heads my way. She looks so sad. My heart throbs painfully and I push the feeling aside, heading over to her as she approaches. "Hey, Ellie." She looks up at me, startled, and stops. Hey, hi, sorry, do I know you?" "Oh, shoot." "No, yeah, you do. My name's Sam. I'm in the year above you." She wrinkles her nose. "No, you aren't. Do you even go to this school?" "Yeah, right, just kidding. I'm new, sorry. I thought that we had met before, but maybe somebody just told me your name. Sorry." There is an awkward pause. What the hell is wrong with me? Stop apologizing, Sam. "Oh, well, nice to meet you." She grimaces and strides right past me. I fume to myself quietly. "Oh, you've messed this up already, you idiot. Well, screw it. In for a penny, in for a pound, as they say." I put out my hands. "All right, you got me. You know what, Ellie? I'm not in the year above, and I'm not a new kid either. We met earlier this evening, and you were dead. A ghost, and now I'm trying to save you. This is the second time that I played through the school day." She glances over her shoulder at me but doesn't slow her pace. She laughs awkwardly. "Okay, great. Sorry, I really need to go." 8G, right? Good news, I'm coming with you." She clutches her books a little tighter to her chest as she weaves between the taller kids in the corridor. I put a hand on her shoulder. It's soft and warm, but she flinches away from my touch. "Please don't touch me," she says quickly. "Right, sure, sorry, but look, please just hear me out. I know what you've written in your journal, in the purple one. You've written out your last day. You've got bullet points for apologize to Mrs. Reeves and for clear out locker." She stares at me again as we arrive at the door to 8G. "How do you know that? Are you some kind of stalker? What do you want?" "I want you to not hurt yourself when you go home from school, Ellie, okay? That's what I want." I say this a little too loudly. Hush falls in the corridor as faces turn to ours, and it takes a long, strained moment before the conversations resume, in a lower tone than they had before. Ellie fumes. "Why did you have to say that?" she hisses, and her eyes start to water and her cheeks flush. "My life is none of your concern. Just go away, please." And with this, she turns and pushes through the door into the classroom. And after a beat, I follow. The same spiel plays out as before. Mrs. Reeves asks me to introduce myself to the class, though this time I remember to say my own name. And further, since it's neither recommended by the teacher nor does Ellie seem in any kind of mood now to engage with me, I decide to give her a little bit of space, and I sit instead next to the only other free seat in the room, next to a girl on the opposite side. "Hey," she says as I sit down. "Hey. So where are you from, new kid?" I tell her and she shrugs. "Oh, I thought that you might have been from Australia." I hesitate. Why would I be from Australia? She shrugs and goes back to doodling in her book. There is a rumor that we were getting a new kid from Australia is all. Shame, I really like the accent. There's another pause as I process this nonsense and then I chuckle awkwardly. Right, you did just hear me speak though in front of the class. I wasn't really listening. Right. Silence. Mrs. Reeves reads through the register and I tap my knuckles against the desk, and then I gesture over to Ellie. So what's her deal then? Who? Ellie. The girl beside me looks up at once, eyes sparkling and eyebrows raised. She puts down her pen and smirks. And do you like her? I flush and try not to respond to this directly. Just wondering is all. She would definitely date you if you asked. Oh, that's adorable. Bit of warning for you though, new kid. I wouldn't go there. She's not exactly somebody worth associating with. And why is that? I reply, bristled. The girl shrugs. Hey, I mean you can if you want, but why bother? It's not like she's interesting or anything. But hey, it's a free country, so do what you want to do, I guess. I look back to Ellie. She sits quietly with her chin in her hand, staring ahead at nothing in particular. A long and slithering shadow is sent swimming across the room. I feel the seat and the desk rumble as it passes by, but nobody else in the room seems to notice. I swivel in my seat to look behind me through the windows at the back of the class, but there's nothing there. My neighbor looks at me amused. You're strange, she says simply. I reply, still looking through the window for evidence of the watchful, waiting monstrosity. But the bell rings and the morning begins, and it goes in much the same way as it did last time, with a few key differences. Firstly, there's no pretense on my part. I am 100% honest with Ellie. I walked through a mirror to get here. I tell her in the first lesson of the day, whispering to her from the seat behind. I'm not joking. This is the second time that I'm living through the day, honestly. The teacher's going to use an example from his home life in a minute. Listen. We do so, and sure enough the guy starts trying to link the subject matter back to a semi-amusing anecdote from his week. Ellie glances over her shoulder at me. You're freaking me the hell out. I don't know what you're trying to do, but please stop. I'm serious. I've been speaking to your ghost, Ellie. I know that you love mechanics and how things work, watches and stuff. You need to listen to me. This is insane, she hisses back. Who have you been talking to? This is cruel. I release a breath of frustration through my nose. Why would you want to commit suicide? I don't get it. Your life doesn't seem that bad to me, please. Don't do this. Leave me alone. And with that, she turns around and ignores me for the remainder of the lesson, and then sprints away the second that the bell is rang. I run my hands through my hair. This shit is not working. Maybe I should just do as she says, just give up and leave her be. I wonder what she's doing now, Ghost Ellie, if she's watching me somehow, or if she's playing around with the watch or sitting alone huddled in that cold dark room as the monsters close in. I clench and unclench my fingers. I am here for a purpose. I didn't just stumble onto this school by chance. There's a reason, there must be a reason, and Ellie can be saved, I'm sure of it. So I keep on trying. The second lesson, I give her a bit of space and try to come up with a plan. I'm struggling to think though as my eyes feel heavier and heavier with every blink. I've lost track of time and my body clock is all sorts of screwed up right about now. I put my head down and my hands on the desk just for a minute and I try to think. I see in my mind's eye the swirling shadows of the eels, eyes glowing in the wintry gloom as these snow cascades all around. I see Ellie, her hair rippling gently as if underwater. She looks back at me sadly as she rises up and out of my reach into the storm. I can see myself in the blizzard. I see the dark and emptied school collapse all around me and caught in the gale. I see the lights of the street lamps go out one by one as the monsters close the distance. Their jaws crack open with a hiss of icy steam, and I'm jerked awake from my dreams by a shake of my shoulder. "It's Sam, isn't it?" says the teacher, an eyebrow raised as I blink away my sleep. I can hear some of the other students giggling. "I can only apologize if my lesson has quite literally bored you to sleep, but do try to stay alert, thank you." I nod apologetically and the teacher returns to the front of the class. I look immediately over to Ellie, but her eyes are downcast. Determination runs through me like a river. Save her. I'm able to follow her to lunch this time. She doesn't escape through the crowd, and so I watch as she gets her food and takes it to a table outside in the sun. It's still pretty cold, but I guess it's where she would rather be. I take a seat not too far away, but one out of her immediate line of sight as I try to plan my next move. I suppress a yawn and mull over my options, and as I do, a group of kids approach her. 2 boys and 3 girls. Ellie is not looking, but the group are clearly egging each other on. I can't hear what they're saying, but one of the girls is shaking her head and laughing. I watch as another one of them raises a plastic bottle and unclasps the lid. As the bottle is aimed, and the first girl suddenly reaches over and squeezes the plastic between her hands, and a stream of water is blasted right into the side of Ellie's face, down her clothes and over her food. And the worst part for me is the fact that she doesn't say a damn thing. She stays totally quiet as the group laughs. "Oh my God," one of the girls say. "I'm so sorry. It wasn't me, it was Karina. She did it." And they keep laughing amongst themselves, passing blame as they make a quick and gleeful exit. Ellie only sits there in silence. I get up at once to go over and see if she's okay. "Hey," I say as I get closer, "are you alright?" But it's clear as I draw near that it wasn't water sprayed over her. Based on the smell that rises, thick and strong, it's vinegar. Jesus, I mutter as I stand there beside her awkwardly. That's messed up. Ellie says nothing. Her eyes are covered by her fringe, but her cheeks are a deep scarlet, and she grabs up her backpack and strides suddenly off, leaving her ruined lunch behind. "Hey, wait, are you alright? Ellie!" I call after her, but she sprints away into the building and disappears around a corner. "God damn it," I shout out to no one in particular. A gust of sudden wind rustles my collar. And so the day goes on. Ellie misses the next lesson, as she did on the first playthrough, though I know why this time. And when she finally returns to English, the last lesson of the day, I feel my chest tightening as I realize that once again my time is running short. I head right over to her and she takes a step back at my approach, frustrating me further. "Ellie, I'm not your enemy here, for God's sake," I say to her. "Please, just hear me out. You're gonna be picked on to read a passage aloud today, so maybe just read it over a few times in advance to practice. Act 4, Scene 4, I think it was." She squints at me as if trying to read me, searching for something inside perhaps, and I wait patiently for an accusation or an insult. But she says nothing. She simply sighs and walks right past to her seat. I am struck, and not for the first time, by an ethereal kind of deep sadness, one that troubles and dismays me as it washes over me. And as it happens, my advice was useless anyway. Ellie never gets to read out a section of Shakespeare. As the time draws near, instead of watching Ellie get called upon, the head teacher instead opens up the classroom door. The heads of all the students turn to look, and he calls Ellie out from the lesson. The class falls into a hushed silence as she gathers her things and steps outside. And after another minute or two, I excuse myself to the bathroom and I set off in pursuit. It takes me a good 5 minutes to locate the head's office, but once I do, I crack the door, cringing as I do so and hoping not to be discovered. And I listen in. "Very troubling, Ellie. Comes the voice of the head, and then he pauses, but there is no response from the girl in question. He speaks on. We take threats of suicide very seriously, young lady. Very seriously indeed. Now, I wasn't there this morning, and I don't know exactly what was said. I grimace and think back to what I had blurted out to Ellie in front of all those people. But it's important that we talk through this. You always can rely on us here. Ellie snorts humorlessly. The head clears his throat and continues. And we have arranged for you to speak with the school's counselor tomorrow morning. This will continue for as long as necessary. I will also, of course, need to inform your parents. Ellie changes her tune here. I can sense the sudden desperation in her voice as she begs. No, sir, please don't call my parents. Please, it was a dumb joke. Sir, honestly, you don't need to call them, please don't. I'm sorry, Ellie, but I have a duty of care. And with this, Ellie breaks down. My guilt is sharp as she cries behind the door and I take my leave. What's the damn point? I return to English and I wait for her to come back, but she doesn't. Then at the end of the day, I am again waiting by the steps to the school at 2:59 p.m. There goes Ellie. She walks right by with her backpack full. I call out to her and she picks up the pace. The air grows thick. No, I mutter out loud. Not again, please. A gust of wind ruffles through my hair and rustles the collar of my coat. It's becoming harder to speak out, and I'm forced to project to raise my voice beyond a whisper. And there's that sensation again, that feeling of walking through water. I struggle against the winds and the thickness of its air. The lowering sun glints orange and sends Ellie's shadow long and dark back towards me as the gap between us widens. And all around us return the eels, slow yet rumbling as they push aside the air as they form from mist and shadow. They look down to the girl, hungry and eyes aglow. They are closer this time. One looks over to me, its hazy yellow eye meets mine, and the clouds shimmer behind and beside. I'm lost within it as I call out for her, but my voice simply does not work in this moment. My sight is obscured and I close my eyes tight shut. When I open them again, I am stumbling to the floor of the classroom. I trip and crash into a nearby desk with a grunt and grab hold of the counter beside me for balance. It takes a second or two for the world to stop spinning. I catch my breath and watch as Ellie plays with her holograph on the watch. She carefully moves a gear into the new location. I wait for her to speak and eventually she does. She winks and sticks her tongue out at me. Oh, no luck again, huh? I am met with a sudden anger and I rise up to full height. What the hell is wrong with you? This isn't a game. I'm trying to save your life. I didn't ask you to do a damn thing, she shouts back. Why do you even care so much about me? I throw out my hands. What do you want, Ellie? Do you want these things to get you? These eels in the sky? What even are they? Do you want to be saved? Ellie makes an ooh sound. What a big hero we have over here, she says sarcastically. The big hero wants to save the poor girl. Well, it's too late. My decision was made in hell, I don't regret it. I'm fine, it's done. It's done and I feel great. You feel great, she shrugs. Sure, why not? I'm not scared, I'm not afraid, I'm not terrified about what's going to happen next. There is no next. I'm free, Sam, I'm free. Well, if that's true, I say, then why not let those things outside come and get you? Why not leave the building and let them take you wherever? Then you'll truly be gone, gone forever, I guess. Or wherever they take you. If they're even supposed to be here at all. To this, Ellie says nothing. She brushes a strand of her hair behind her ear and she looks out the window. The room, I suddenly realize, appears smaller than it was before. The desks and chairs are more closely clumped and the shadows are darker. The students' paintings hung up and across the walls were their colors always so dark. and some of them, the self-portraits, the eyes no longer look as they did. The lines in these scratches in the paint appear more pronounced. The snowstorm rages, and the monsters drift through the wind. This place is getting smaller, isn't it? I ask Ellie, looking around. The walls are closing in, literally. She nods and gives me a half smile. It won't be long now, I should think. I slump back down on the desk and watch the snow, thick and white against the glass. I look down on my wrist to get a sense of the time, but of course, there's no watch. And as always, the watch is broken anyway. I turn to observe Ellie play with it for a minute, or at least the holographic spectral representation of the thing. So how come you're so into that stuff then? I ask her, and she glances at me and brushes her hair from her eyes. It's just the intricacy of the mechanisms, she replies. Rotating gears, all turning and spinning together to make something work. I just think that it's fascinating. They make a thing greater than the sum of their parts. I nod quietly as I watch. She shoots me a look. Well, aren't you going to make fun of me? Why would I do that? I reply. I agree. You agree? Yeah, I mean, I'm no engineer, but my expertise isn't to quite the same level as yours. I point to the ghostly gears and pieces of watch, spread out as they are in the air above us. But it's still interesting. She says thoughtfully. We sit quietly for a while. After a few minutes, she sticks out her tongue in thought and furrows her brow, experimenting with the watch pieces and trying them in different locations, and I try to force down a rush of feeling. We're running out of time, aren't we? I say. Time, she echoes and then nods. Yeah, we are. I don't want those things to get you, Ellie, and I don't want to be left here alone. I told you, Sam, she says, but she says it gently. There's nothing keeping you here. The door is still there for now. You could leave if you want. Yeah, there is something keeping me here, I say quietly. I can't just leave you behind. It's okay, she says, but I shake my head. Tell me about you, I say, and she stops, and then swivels on the edge of the desk that she sat on to face me. She cocks her head. Tell you about me, I shrug. Sure, what's your story? My story? She laughs, and it's a nice sound, though it fades quickly. She rubs her arm and looks down to the floor. There's not much to tell. My dad was military, and so we moved around a lot until recently. My parents are nice enough people, but they're so cold. I could never talk to them, but I also couldn't stand letting them down. She sighs. I was one of those gifted kids, the ones that people make memes of nowadays. Wasted potential, etc. Honestly, it's a lame story. I like to draw. I like opening things up to see how they work and screwing around with gears and bolts. I moved to this school 2 years ago because I was bullied at the last one. It's technically better here, I guess, but nothing works for me. Nothing works out for me. And I was sick of it, Sam. Sick of not being in control. And so I took control and I made a choice, and I should stand by it. She looks right at me, but I don't see surety in her eyes. I don't know what it is that I see. And what about you? She asks. What's your story, crazy boy who wandered into my school? Pretty normal. I was born further north but moved here when I was really young. I go to St. Richard's School. I don't know that one, Ellie replies. Yeah, it's pretty far away. I don't know how I ended up here, to be honest. It's just where the bus dropped me off. It never gets lost, but last night I guess it did. I sigh. I like football, my favorite color's green. School's pretty okay for me, I guess. I'm not one of the popular kids, but, I do okay. She nods. And this watch, it's old. Did you get it passed down to you? Yeah, it was my grandpa's originally. That's cool. So why did he give it to you? She asks. Oh, he didn't give it to me specifically. He originally gave it to my older brother. It still worked back then. So did your brother gift it to you after he broke it? Not exactly. I reply with a sad smile. I inherited it after he died. Oh, Ellie says, as the dulled sound of the storm rumbles softly outside. I'm sorry. Do you mind me asking how he died? I hesitated, but then... He killed himself, actually. Oh. And we say nothing for a while after that. A long, long while. The terrible shadow of a drifting eel passes over the classroom and it brings with it renewed, both the lasting and the very active fears that I've been battling with since the beginning. Let me help you, Ellie, I say to her softly. I watch as quiet tears start to run down her face. Sam, I'm sorry, it's just too late. Too late? No, I refuse to believe it. And so without another word, I rise from the desk. I turn and I grip my teeth and I return to the mirror, striding on through and wincing as I'm once again enveloped by swirling mists and glass-like fogs. I clench my jaw and with a little stumble, I land this time on my feet as the vapor-like mists are blown out from my shoes and disappear into nothingness. I struggle with a momentary bout of queasiness, but I force it away. I open my eyes, and there is the school, as always. Kids hanging around and heading on inside. And above, drifting through the air is one of the creatures. Shadowy smoke like black. It slithers over the building with a low hiss. I watch, paralyzed as it cracks open its jaw, showing me its monstrous teeth as it swims quietly overhead. It brings with it the cold, a chill that shivers across me as I watch the monster disappear into the air, fading away as quickly as it had appeared. I've got to make this one count. I break the spell and jump up the steps and into the building. I ease my way through the crowd and wait by the corridor that I know she's going to come from. Any second now, and there she is. Hey, I say to her as casually as possible, and she looks up at me, in her world for the first time. Hi, she replies cautiously, and I gesture to the handfuls of books that she's carrying. Can I give you a hand? She looks at me in confusion as kids wind their way around us and through the lobby. With your stuff, I mean, I can help you carry it if you want. Oh, she says. No, it's fine, but thank you though. Sure. Hey, could I walk with you? She hesitates again and looks around, looking for some evidence that this is a trap or a play of some kind, and my heart goes out to her. Yeah, that's fine, she says quietly, and so we walk together, through the lobby and down the halls to 8G. So, are you new here then, or? Yeah, I reply. I'm new. I'm Sam, by the way. Ellie. She gives me a quick half smile. I'm going to register right now. I'm in 8G with Mrs. Reeves. Oh, yeah, that's the same for me. Is she nice, Mrs. Reeves? Yeah, Ellie replies, and I detect a little melancholy in her voice. She is nice. I have to talk to her today. Oh yeah, how come? I ask, and again she hesitates as she thinks on how to respond. I just need to apologize for some stuff. She's a good teacher, and I feel like I'm letting her down. If she's really a good teacher, then I'm sure she would disagree or understand at least. I offer, but Ellie only shrugs as we enter into the classroom. Once the kids have all settled down, I am once again asked to introduce myself. I give the correct name and coolly take my seat beside Ellie. I suppress a series of yawns and have to force my eyes open at various intervals as the morning progresses. I'm so damn tired. I am perhaps also a little too overbearing in my attempts to get Ellie to open up. I can imagine you, reader, shouting at me to chill the hell out, and I get it, but cut me some slack. I'm under a lot of stress here and time is not on my side. I'm just trying to help this girl, okay? since she seems so reluctant to do it herself. I tell her about when I was bullied as a young kid, try to get her to open up in turn. She is sympathetic but a closed book. She's so different to how she is in that classroom, compared with the ghost Ellie. But I persist. She gets frustrated with me at lunch when I refuse to let her sit outside. I try to steer her elsewhere, but she doesn't understand why, nor can I really explain why. I am distant during the mealtime conversation as I watch with one eye over her shoulder, making sure that the group with the bottle of vinegar don't come this way. And when it comes time for her to speak out in English, I cringe through her dreadful reading, but I do my best to nod along and to seem supportive. "It's fine," I whisper from beside her. "Just take your time." But she shoots me a look, and I'm not sure if she even appreciated my support, or was only embarrassed by it. And by the day's end, as the lesson draws to a close and we're in the process of gathering up our belongings. "Hey Ellie, so what are you up to this evening?" I ask her, and she laughs nervously. What? "This evening, what are you up to after school?" "Oh, I'm busy, lots of stuff to do." Maybe we could do it together." I gather my courage. Maybe I could come around." The kid at the desk beside us shoots me a look and a smirk. Ellie flushes. You want to come around to my house?" "Sure." "Why?" "Why? Because I struggle for justification and I swallow my pride. Because I like you and I want to spend time with you." "You like me?" "No, you don't. You've known me for a day." Her body language becomes more uncomfortable, restless. I'm also not thrilled by this rejection. I'm no ladies' man, but I didn't think that I was that bad of a catch. "I think it could be fun." I manage, glancing down to my non-existent watch, and then up at the clock on the wall. 2:57. "Sorry, Sam, I'm not sure." "I'm just worried about you, Ellie, is all," I say, conscious of the time ever ticking away. This makes her pause. She repeats my words. "Why would you be worried about me, Sam?" I shrug and try to deflect. "I don't know, you seemed a little sad today." "I seemed a little sad." "Geez, is there an echo in here?" I chuckle anxiously. "Sam, you've known me for a day. How do I seem a little sad?" "I just don't want you being alone tonight, that's all. Maybe I could come back and spend some time with you at your place." She takes a retreating step and adopts a cold, defensive stance. "You know that something's up, don't you? What do you know, Sam? What's going on?" I glance to the clock. The other kids have all filtered out of the room now. 2:58. It's only Ellie and I. "Ellie, I just don't want you to do anything stupid. Something that you might regret, I guess. There's still so much to be positive about. You have so much value in your life, even if you don't see it." Ellie puts a sudden hand to her mouth to repress an escaping sob. I begin to panic as her eyes start to fill with tears. "It's that obvious. You've known me for a day, and you already know, don't you, that I hate my life. If you can see it, then who else can? Does everybody know, and nobody gives a shit?" She chokes out her words. "I'm just done, Sam. I'm so done with all of it." "Ellie, it's okay, I didn't." But Ellie runs off. Through the door and down the halls I take after her. "Ellie!" But through the school she goes, out and descending the little stone steps in long strides, and the air grows thick. "No!" I scream. Please just stop." A gust of wind ruffles through my hair and rustles the collar of my coat. There's that sensation again, the feeling of running through water. I struggle against the winds and the thickness of its air. The lowering sun glints orange and sends Ellie's shadow long and dark back towards me as the gap between us widens. "No!" I cry out. "No!" And all around us are those terrible, nightmarish creatures. They seem faster now, slicker in their movements, rumbling as they push aside the air, slithering through the growing mists and deepening darkness. They look down to Ellie, hungry and eyes aglow. The sky, it would suddenly seem, is full of them. They shimmer with the clouds, and my line of sight is lost beneath billowing mists and swirling fogs. I'm falling, my throat hoarse and hands clenched as the winds rush past my face. And here I am, stumbling and staggering to the floor of the classroom through the mirror. I keep my footing, but I knock into a group of clustered chairs upon my return. I grab a hold of a desk for balance as I catch my breath, and I wait for the world to stop spinning. I retch as my chest rises and falls. I look up to see Ellie sat there cross-legged on the counter. She isn't playing with the watch this time. She makes no jokes. She's just looking at me in silence. The counter is closer to the mirror than it was before. The room is smaller, yet the window, it seems, is wider. I can see the monstrous eels swimming patiently in the world beyond, drifting through the snow and the storm and the darkness. The rumbling is ever present now, anticipatory and warning. I can feel the vibrations through the wood of the desk. They're closing in. Slowly but surely the walls are closing in, and the window is widening and the storm is growing stronger. I sigh. I keep failing, Ellie. She says nothing. Do you even want to be saved? Again, she says nothing. I don't get angry though this time. I just rub my jaw and I look through the window. I'm not some delicate flower that needs saving, Sam, she says. I can't just sit by and watch you throw your life away. I made my choice, Sam, it's done. But it doesn't have to be, it doesn't. The mirror, the creatures, you've been given a second chance, don't you get it? And you have to take it, you have to take it. It's my life and I'm allowed to do with it what I choose. But is this what you want, Ellie? What you actually want? It can't be. I'm sure of it, I've seen it in your eyes. A part of you regrets this, all of this. I'm not happy when I'm alive, Sam, she says firmly. And I was tired, so tired. And now I'm free. But don't you get it, don't you see? The way that you are now, inquisitive and funny and lively, and you give out as good as you get. You're self-assured and confident. She flushes. This, Ellie, is how you could be all the time when you're alive. I'm not saying it's easy, but practice makes perfect. A change of mindset is a good start. Get some meds, some professional advice, and a change in how you project yourself. I stumble over my words. I know that I'm spewing a lot of cliches here, but I'm speaking from the heart. In the corner of my eye, I catch glimpses of the painted portraits across the walls. Clumped together now, there is essentially no wall space between them. The faces are dark and twisted, scary and unsettling. I struggle to focus on them for too long as one struggles to focus on faces in a dream. Ellie looks to my grandfather's watch, majestic but broken on the surface of the desk. She puts out a hand and the projected gears and cogs all spin in an intricate pattern right above it. And very softly she says one more thing. You can't fix a person's head in a day, Sam. No, perhaps not, but I can convince them to live till tomorrow. And so I turn, exhausted. Shadows swim in the corners of my vision and my movements seem paradoxically both airy and sluggish, but I stride onwards. With the rumble of the eels and the hiss of their terrible jaws in the back of my head, with the roar of the winds in my ears, with body bruised but constitution sharp, I go for one more time. And this will be the last time. I can feel it. No more chances now as I make my final march to the mirror between the worlds. So, through the mirror I go, wary but bitterly determined. Ellie wants to live. She might still be too stubborn to admit it, but she wants to live, and I can see it, I can feel it. I know what a will to live looks like, damn it, and what the lack of one looks like too. The world warps around me. The rumbling and the hissing grows louder as that crystalline smoke and mist blows up and around my face and the wind roars. But I land squarely on my feet. The clouds dissipate and without skipping a beat, I head directly towards the school doors. The shadows seem darker now. There are monsters in the air, I can see them, though I pay them no mind, ignoring the fear that tries to take its hold on me as I walk. As I approach the front doors, I allow a deep breath before heading inside. All around me is the typical childlike bustle of a relatively mundane school day, supposedly at least, but this is anything but. It is extraordinary. It is extraordinary because I get to spend it with Ellie, with the most interesting girl that I've ever met. And there she is. She hasn't noticed me yet, but she approaches, clutching her books to her chest. I gather my courage, and from above comes a voice. "Ask me about my jacket," she says in a whisper. "Make sure to ask about the jacket." I log her words as her past self enters into speaking distance. "Hey," I say to her, and she stops and looks up at me. I smile, and cautiously she smiles back. I shrug apologetically. "Sorry to bother you," I say with a lopsided grin that comes all too naturally. "I'm new here." I pause. "Well, kind of. I'm only here for the day, really. And I think I'm supposed to start in 8G? "Oh," she replies. Yeah, I'm in 8G. Do you want me to show you?" I nod. "Yeah, that would be great, thanks." And after she gestures, I fall in step alongside. I comment on her coat. "I like your jacket." It's true. She looks at me, gauging my authenticity. "For real?" "For sure, it's cool." She tucks a strand of loose hair behind her ear. "Thanks," she says, and I hear warmth in her voice. "My name is Ellie, by the way. It's nice to meet you." "And you," I reply. "My name is Sam." And so the day goes on, a day like so many before it, a day uniquely and tragically beautiful. Many days are, I start to realize, when one cares to consider. I actually pay attention to her as a person today, not just as a project to fix. I notice for the first time the flash of a shining silver watch of her own beneath her sleeve, and I ask her to show it to me. She does so gladly. I ask her where she got it, and she says that it was a gift from her parents for good grades, about 3 or so years ago. She gets sad and tells me that she doesn't do so well in school anymore. She finds it harder and harder to focus, to care. Her grades are slipping and she feels like they'll never come back up. "I just don't have the right headspace," she murmurs to me as she doodles in the corner of her textbook. "I doubt that," I reply. "I don't know how to advise you, but I really believe that you can get back into the zone. Someone like you can find a way back." She scoffs, but I catch a little smile as she does so. I talk to her about my own watch, how it's broken and timeless. I describe it to her and she suggests some ideas on how to fix the thing. But of course, her suggestions go in one ear and out the other. She laughs when she catches the expression of cluelessness on my face, and the day goes on. I sit with her at lunch, on the little table just outside. I watch as the bitterly familiar group of kids approach, 2 boys and 3 girls. They aren't in Ellie's line of sight, but they're clearly in the process of egging each other on. I wait for them to approach, but it's taking them longer to do so this time. I think my presence here is making it harder for them to make up their minds. I decide to call them out preemptively. "You guys okay over there?" I said, amably enough. They laugh as if sharing some intense and intimate joke. They come a little closer. "You two having fun?" One of the boys says as a girl glances to her friend with a grin, raising the water bottle filled with vinegar at the 2 of us, moving to unscrew the lid. I reach up and I grab it right out of her hand. As expected, the group acts as if I've done them such a great dishonor. "Chill, what the hell?" one of them says. "You were going to squirt this right at us," I reply. "We weren't," a girl replies. "Yes, you were," I reply deadpan. Ellie watches with a raised eyebrow. She seems less intimidated this time, more bemused. "Hey, we were just screwing around, man," says one of the boys. "Right," is my only reply. I let the word hang dead in the air, waiting until they continue their laughter and go about their way, and on with their conversations. But crucially, Ellie and I are able to go on with ours. And then when lunch comes to an end, I tell Ellie that I'll meet up with her in class and I take a little detour. I approach the bench that they're sitting on and raise the bottle of pie, opening the lid and blasting a cold stream of vinegar into the backs of all their heads. I take off, laughing as they scream and squeal with distress. The hours of the day roll by. I push through my exhaustion, doing my best to brush away Ellie's concern when she comments on it. I just smile at her and hope that the dark circles beneath my eyes are at the least somewhat aesthetic. The orange-yellow glow of the sun filters in through the classroom windows. It catches in her hair as she brushes it behind her ear, and it glints with a watery shine in the pools of her eyes. The sound of the general muttering and murmuring of our classmates is a faint but steady backing melody from all around, accompanied by the occasional scrape of a chair and the scribbling of pens on paper. No one but me notices as the orange-yellow light is lost beneath sudden shadow, as an arctic breeze blows in from the only open window, as the blinds are thrown back from the glass, and the enormous, spectral eel from beyond the plane drifts hungrily past. Closer than ever before, I hear it rumble. It shakes the desks and rattles the wall as it swims impossibly by, black gray and slick, terrible in its pursuit. I do my best not to react as its hiss shivers through the shade. I try to still the fear that has plagued me since the beginning. I try to block the monster from my mind's eye. The clock on the wall of the classroom ticks, and after a shiver, the light returns. When English comes around, I volunteer to speak in Ellie's place. I offer to read aloud the passage of Romeo and Juliet before the teacher can call upon her. And hey, I do flub some of the harder sentences, but I do a pretty good job. To be honest, I think that most of the kids in class were relieved to some degree or another that they didn't have to suffer through the anxiety of being picked on either. The day, as it always eventually does, is drawing to a close. 2:57 p.m. The teacher lets us out early and we walk, Ellie and I, side by side down the length of the corridors as the bustle and clamor filters out through the doors around us. Each footstep feels heavy. The sound of the clocks grow louder and louder with each tick of the hands, and each blink feels heavier and heavier on my eyes. "Hey," Ellie says to me as we leave the day behind us, as our imprints drift and dance from place to place in the building's memories. "I was wondering, do you have a Snapchat or anything?" "Sure," I reply, reaching for my phone, but of course it isn't there, and I cannot for the life of me remember my username. I apologize and I tell her this. She shrugs and brushes a strand of hair behind her ear. "That's no worry, here's mine." She reaches into her bag for her purple journal and tears off a corner of a page, scribbling her username down onto the paper before handing it to me. "Or you could just give it to me tomorrow if you want." I shift. I'm not quite sure if it's my imagination, but I swear that I can hear the steady repetitive beat of a drum in the distance, over and over in time to the ticking of the clocks. "Ellie, the thing is," I say as we pass through the lobby and out the doors into the brisk, cool air beyond, "I don't think that I'm going to be here tomorrow. In fact, I definitely won't be. I'm just passing through." She stops and turns to look at me. "Oh," she says, "that's right." There's a pause. "You know, I never did ask you. What's the reason for that? Why would a kid like you just show up to a school for a single day and then just disappear?" I smile at her, but I fear that it doesn't quite reach my eyes. The light of the steadily lowering sun shines bright on her face. It's like I'm seeing her in high definition as the breeze gently rustles her hair. She adjusts her bag and cocks her head at me. The clock ticks. Ellie, I have to go now. I say simply, trying to keep the emotion in my voice to a minimum. Can she feel it? Can she feel the intensity and the importance of this moment? You have to go now, she laughs. So dramatic. She knocks me on the shoulder, and after an intimate hesitation, she passes me by and sets off down the road and steadily away from the school. I don't know what I'm going to do without you, though, she calls back over her shoulder. A joke, sure, but its depth does not go unnoticed. You only met me today, I call to her as the wind blows, ruffling my hair and rustling the collar of my coat. Who knows who you'll meet tomorrow? The air thickens all around and the lowering sun glints orange. It sends Ellie's shadow long and dark back towards me as the gap between us widens, but it illuminates her silhouette, a bright outline of shimmering golden light. I take a difficult step forwards, and I am for the last time falling through the mist and swirling crystalline fogs. The wind rushes past my face and ears, and the gale is loud as I breathe in a blast of icy, wintry air. Tears run from my eyes against my will, and I stumble through the surface of the mirror and into the familiar deserted classroom with a crash. And when I find the strength to look up, it truly is deserted this time, dark and empty. There is no one else here. There is no Ellie. I wipe a sleeve across my eyes. The shape and size of the place is returned to its original metrics, and the lights I don't fail to notice are all off. No yellow light filters in through the glass of the classroom door from the corridor. The pictures and the paintings on the wall no longer appear frightening or in any way threatening, and while my heart beats fast, there do not appear to be any great monsters drifting through the snowstorm outside. Ellie? I murmur, but there is no response. She's gone. And you know, I think it might just be time that I left as well. And so I take my grandfather's watch from its place on the desk and hastily attach it around my wrist, pushing out through the door and walking steadily through the cold shadows and down the stairs, through corridor after corridor until I have returned to the lobby. I pass by the emblem of the school emblazoned on the wall. Ad Malora ad Elusam. I'll research it when I get home. I'll find out where this place is exactly, and the coordinates if I have to just in case. I reach into my pocket for Ellie's note, the one that she tore from her purple journal, but it's not there. To my frustration, I find that too is gone. I struggle with an emotion that I find difficult to describe. Was I successful? Was I enough? Did I save her? Did I save Ellie? Or was I too late? I hesitate at the entrance to the school. I turn and take one last long look around the lobby. One final check. Waiting and hoping that Ellie might appear to me one last time, to let me know that she's okay, to say goodbye at the least. But she does not appear and nothing happens. The wind whistles beyond the doors, and so I take my leave. I push on out into the cold as my hair is blown back from my head, and I stride out into the snow and the haze, trudging through it and back to the road, following the familiar glow of the street lamps, continuing my way and pushing ever forward. I see her face in my mind's eye. I hear her voice in my head. I have to get home now, I think to myself, before I collapse from exhaustion into the snow. My parents are probably worried sick after all. I don't even know how long I've been lost. I raise my watch to my face and squint through the snow. It catches in the orange glint of the street lamps, and it ticks. I pause for a second beneath the overhead glow, and I watch as the intricate hands of my grandfather's then brother's watch go surely and steadily around. Dutifully around the face of the watch they go, ticking on and on as they were always supposed to. Huh, I murmur aloud as I set off into the storm.
In 2 miles, take exit 19 for Valley Park Drive South.
Siri chirped from my sister's phone. Charlotte, turn that off. I know where I'm going. Are you sure about that? I mean, it has been a couple of decades, Mark. Please, like I could ever forget where Adventure Valley is. Come on, we spent every summer of. Hey, there it is. I swerved briefly into the oncoming lane as Charlotte thrust her arm in front of my face to point excitedly out the window. There's Adventure Valley. Oh my God, what ride is that? That coaster, it was called, Steel something, right? No, wait. That's Mayhem Mountain, isn't it? I gently pushed my sister's arm out of my face and back over to her seat. I couldn't fault her for her excitement while I was trying so hard to control my own giddiness. It felt like we were kids again, yelling and bouncing in the backseat of my parents' car as the first shining rails and wooden planks of the park's roller coasters came into view above the treetops. That's the Steel Viper, I told her. Mayhem Mountain's on the other end of the park, and that wooden coaster over there is the Excalibur. Oh yeah, I remember those. I was always too much of a wuss to ride the Viper, but I rode the crap out of the Excalibur. Well, Charlotte, you're an adult now. I think it's time to take on the Viper. As long as the contractors have tested it and given it the okay, then I'm in. That was really the question, wasn't it? We didn't know which rides had been inspected and cleared and which ones hadn't. I sent up a silent prayer that Mayhem Mountain was counted among the rides that had. I had left Brandon several voicemails asking about it since he was the one in charge of everything, but with how fast things had been moving since we had bought the park, I couldn't fault him for being a busy man. If you had told 12-year-old me that my crazy, hyper, wild-eyed friend, Brandon Decker, would end up graduating cum laude from Northwestern Business School, I would have laughed in your face. Brandon, no way. Tyler, maybe, but never Brandon. In fact, half the reason I think he chose a business designation was because of Adventure Valley. When the park had closed in 1989, Brandon had gathered all of us together in his basement and, with a gravitas and solemnness that I had never seen in him before or since, asked us to make a pact. At the time, the promise had been the most serious vow that 5 12-year-olds could ever make. High off of an entire summer of Adventure Valley fun, we agreed with all the ceremony of a meeting of Parliament that we would one day come together and buy Adventure Valley Amusement Park. Of course, back then we had planned to just buy it and ride the roller coasters into the ground. We decided which friends from school we would let in and which enemies would be barred from the gates. It had always been our park, and it was only right that we should have it. It had taken 20 years, but we eventually did fulfill our promise, with a heck of a lot of pushing from Brandon and a sizable offer of collateral from Tyler. The bank had agreed to give us the multi-million-dollar loan to buy, repair, refurbish, and reopen the park. The size of the loan that these 6 of us were responsible for gave me nightmares for several weeks. How would this place ever turn a profit? It had been closed decades ago after operating in the red for several years. The county had experienced a high number of runaways and missing persons in the area in the last years of the 1980s. The entire region was on edge as the cases mounted and people in the area became depressed and suspicious of each other. It had absolutely killed the park's attendance. But seeing the first cresting waves of roller coaster rails through the trees made me all but forget about my financial worries. This was Adventure Valley, for Christ's sake. If we opened the gates, people would come. There, that's our exit, Charlotte squeaked. I pulled off the interstate and took a left under the bridge. Less than a mile later, we came upon the acres of the park's parking lots to our right. We turned in and drove all the way up to the front near the gates where several other cars were parked. A Lexus, a Mini Cooper, and an old Chevelle and a Honda Civic. Another rental car like ours. Looks like we're the last ones here, Charlotte said. She was right. As we pulled up next to the Lexus, I noticed a group of people standing next to the ticket booth, waving at us excitedly. Oh my God, is that Tyler? Jesus, he's lost some weight. He's so skinny now. And Brandon's losing his hair. Holy crap, is that Koji? Koji got hot. Calm down, Paris Hilton. These guys are my friends. They're off limits to you. Same rules as when we were teenagers. Besides, half of them are married. Oh, really? Which half? I raised an eyebrow at Charlotte and shook my head in amused bewilderment. My little sister never had outgrown her boy craziness. Wait, who's that? Charlotte asked as we got out of the car. What? That's Scott. You know Scott. Not Scott. Scott looks exactly the same. The girl next to Scott. Oh. I had put this off so long that I had actually forgotten to tell my sister at all. That's Danny, Scott's girlfriend. Danny as in Danielle Bircher. Well, yeah. My sister gave me such a horrified look that she would think I had betrayed her to her death, but it was fleeting and quickly replaced by a sly smile. Fine by me. I'm sure she's not the same person that she was in high school. We're all adults now, right? Now come on, let's go. A sigh of relief escaped my chest and I slammed the car door and followed Charlotte over to the entrance. Though I saw most of these guys every year, seeing us all here together standing at the ticket booth of Adventure Valley, it brought me a sort of happiness that I hadn't experienced in many years. Mark Lantis, I can't believe it. Tyler had an edgy, commanding voice that probably made his many employees shudder and scatter. But I knew him like a brother, so his bravado just made me laugh. Can you believe it? I asked as I gave him a hug and a slap on the back. Back at front gates, $15 a day doesn't seem so ridiculous now. $15 a day, yeah, right. Brandon said as he shook my hand. By my math, it looks like we'll be charging about $65 a day. I'll pay it. Charlotte smiled as she gave Koji a hug. Are people really going to pay $65 a day? Koji asked. Even Disneyland only charges $85 and there you get access to 2 parks. How could I forget? Brandon shook his head. One of our investors works for the Mouse. Pity they won't let you design any artwork for this place. Come on, man, I'm not an artist, I'm an engineer. Don't you mean Imagineer? Charlotte winked at him. Koji sighed and shook his head. Yeah, I do. As Brandon and Charlotte teased Koji, I made my way over to the side of the ticket booth where Scott and his girlfriend were conversing. I didn't know why Scott was being so standoffish, but I thought that it might have something to do with the investment. Scott, the least well-off of the 6 of us, worked at his dad's collision shop and hadn't had a whole lot of money to invest. I thought maybe he was embarrassed about the money, but now, watching him lean against the booth with slowly shifting eyes, I realized that it wasn't that at all. Scott was just stoned. Same old Scott. What's up, Burnout? My brother, I haven't seen you in like 15 years. How about a bro hug? Scott smiled and pushed off the wall to come give me a quick hug. Hey, how's it going, man? God, look at you. What's your diet, man? Rabbit food and lettuce. You're not gonna get any ladies with that skinny body. Your mom doesn't seem to mind. Hey Mark, I'm Danny. Do you remember me, Danny Bircher? Scott's girlfriend gave me a shy smile and stuck out her hand so that we could engage in a stiff handshake. Yeah, I think so. You were in my sister's class, right? Charlotte Lantis. And Danny had the decency to look embarrassed. Yeah, but we weren't really friends. That's putting it lightly, I thought. We were freshmen when you guys were seniors, she added. Yep, I do remember that. Maybe I should just get it over with. I called Charlotte over and the reintroduction of the 2 girls, while awkward, was over pretty quickly to everybody's relief. We were all eager to get into the park. It was odd not stopping at the window for tickets and even odder to walk around the rusting turnstiles of the front gates. I delighted in reminding myself that we own this place now. Brandon gave us a tour of the park. Not so much of the geography, we all knew that inside and out, but of the hypothetical layout and reorganization of the park as he saw it. The Excalibur is going to need the most amount of work, according to Rich, Brandon's head contractor. A roller coaster made of wood exposed to the elements for all these years. We'll keep as much of the original structure as is safe, but we might have to rebuild most of it. Do we have money for that? Scott asked loudly from where he walked behind us with Danny. Yeah, Tyler said. We have the money for that. Ah, Mr. Moneybags, that mini dealership treating you good. I nudged him hard with my shoulder. Tyler stumbled but kept enough composure to push me back into a passing churl stall. Those 6 BMW dealerships are treating me very well. Well enough to serve as the sizable collateral that we needed, Brandon added. So, Charlotte ran up behind us and threw her arms around Tyler and Koji. Can we ride some of the rides? Are you kidding? Why do you think we're here? Tyler laughed. I'm just here for Mayhem Mountain, I said, clapping my hands and rubbing them together eagerly. Brandon threw up his hands. All right, fine. I thought you guys would be interested in how your investment is coming along. Koji snorted. All we're interested in is the projected ROI and, more importantly, which rides have passed a safety inspection. Oh. Brandon stopped walking and tried to look annoyed, and failing at that he smiled. A little over half of them are rideable. Suddenly everybody was talking at once. Is Steel Viper open? Yep, that's the one. What about Snapdragon? Yeah, that one is good to go too. Renegade Falls? Nah, the water's not on. High Roller? Yep. Space Spin? Oh yeah. Power Tower? They're doing the inspection this week. But there was only one ride that I really cared about. Mine and Brandon's favorite. What about Mayhem Mountain? Hell yes, he answered to collective groans from the rest. Mayhem Mountain had always been our thing, and the others had always been happy to ride High Roller and Snapdragon into exhaustion. Brandon and I always split off toward the end of the day to ride Mayhem Mountain into the twilight hours. Charlotte shuddered. I hate that ride. Yeah, it's just boring, Koji agreed. I helped design something similar for Disneyland Hong Kong. We put it in Fantasyland for Pete's sake. Hey, that ride is awesome. It's long and it goes upside down, I argued. Charlotte is even too scared to ride it. I'm not scared of that ride, it just gives me the creeps. Something about it just, I don't know, it seems off. Alright, look, we'll start at this end of the park and work our way towards the back. That way we can ride every ride that's passed inspection, including Mayhem Mountain, Brandon said. And Snapdragon, Tyler added, and the others nodded excitedly. Yes, every ride, and of course we can ride them, as many times as we want. Hell yes, brother. Koji high-fived Brandon and we headed down the street towards Space Spin. Our progress through the park was blissfully slow. Everyone wanted to ride every ride multiple times and one person always had to stay in the loading area to operate the ride. It only took an hour or two to forget that I was a fully grown 35-year-old man. Being back here running through the lineways with my friends, arguing who got the first row of the first car, it was like being 12 years all over again. But still my eye was constantly drawn up over the buildings into the distance, to the back of the park where the high gleaming rails of Mayhem Mountain shined in an obscured sun. There would be no arguing who got front row on that coaster. It was me and Brandon. It was always me and Brandon. Charlotte, Tyler, and Koji were the most like children, constantly running ahead and arguing over which ride to get on next, yelling back to ask Brandon if this one or that one had been cleared by the contractors. Brandon and I held back from the group a bit, discussing ideas and possible improvements for the park. Scott and Danny took up the rear of the group, quietly talking and lighting joints. When we arrived at the Enterprise, a simple ride that consisted of spinning cars on a circular track, I offered to flip the switch while the rest of the group rode to excess. The Enterprise always made me sick when we were kids. Brandon offered to stay on the platform with me to chat while everyone else rode the ride. I flipped the switch to turn the ride on, and as the cars spun away from the loading area, the Enterprise's signage came into view. I sighed. All day I had been trying to ignore the bright graffiti sprayed all over the park, but the words painted over the signage for the enterprise were impossible to ignore. Where did the missing kids go? And the rest of the graffiti in the park was much the same. Most said things like, "Where are they? Runaway Row. Find Ryan Kinski. And the missing are now dead." The similar sayings could be found in town sprayed across a few dilapidated buildings in the industrial district. Brandon's eyes avoided the sign, but I could tell that he was thinking about it too. "And do you think the reason they shut this park down, do you see that being an issue for park attendants?" I asked as casually as I could. Brandon was quiet for a few moments as he waited for the ride to slow to a stop so that he could flip the switch again. "Nah, I don't think so. The low attendance issues aren't actually what shut the park down." "They aren't?" This surprised me. "Nope. When we were negotiating the sale of the park, I was given access to the park's financials in the 80s. So they weren't operating at a loss. Oh, they were. But this park has operated in the red since opening day in the 70s. Half of the revenue was being fed back into something called county services, whatever that is. The bank couldn't tell me, and believe me, I tried to find out." "County services," I mused. "Yep, it's bizarre. And according to the paperwork, the park was closed because the owner didn't want to live here anymore. And he couldn't be bothered to wait for a decent offer on the property, so he just sold it off to the bank for next to nothing. So he was a rich guy." I leaned back against the railing to stretch my back. "And an idiot." "Yes, to an extreme in both cases. The owner of the park was Abel Bissett." "Abel Bissett, related to that French billionaire, I'm guessing." Brandon nodded. "Michael Bissett. He built this park for his son in the 70s. Abel was never really what we would call business inclined. I've always heard him described as simple." "I can't believe the son of a billionaire lives in this area." "Well, not anymore. He moved on decades ago." I shook my head in disbelief. Who would ever have thought that our simple little park was owned by a famous billionaire's son? Heck, I may even have sat next to him on rides and had no idea. "You guys want to go again?" Brandon yelled to the others as the ride again came to a stop. "I'm ready to move on," Koji yelled back. "Anybody want to ride again?" "Nope," a chorus of voices replied. It was near 5 o'clock when we finally arrived at Mayhem Mountain. As the sun began to set, a familiar panic and urgency welled in the pit of my stomach. It took a moment for me to realize that we didn't have to leave when the park closed this time, because the park didn't close. We could stay until sunup if we wanted to. As I eagerly approached the turnstile for Mayhem Mountain, Tyler spoke up behind me. "Listen, can we run into town and grab something to eat before we ride Mayhem?" "You really want to ride Mayhem after we eat?" asked Koji. Good point." "There's only one loop." Danny rolled her eyes. "Two," I said. "Don't forget the inline roll." "Yep, two," Scott answered. "And plus it's a 2-minute ride. If your food isn't sitting well, you've got a long wait until it's over." "Look," I said. "Let's ride it a couple of times and then go eat. When we come back, we'll see how we feel." Everyone nodded and we started walking through the lineways up to the platform. When we reached the loading dock, I was excited to see our favorite green car sitting on the track. "The front seat," Brandon and I yelled simultaneously as the train cars came into view and everyone behind us groaned. "I'm staying here," Charlotte said. "I'll just work the launch pad thingy." "Still scared after all these years, Char?" Scott teased her. "Oh, shut up, Burnout." Scott laughed and tousled her hair before running and jumping into the first car behind Brandon and I. Danny got in next to him, and then Tyler and Koji took the second car. We pulled the shoulder restraints down and they locked in place. "Ready?" Charlotte asked. "Yep," Brandon yelled back. "Send the car through." Charlotte pulled the lever and the brakes disengaged. As the car moved forward, I turned to Brandon. "Did we get the green car on purpose?" I yelled at him as the coaster clacked around the load platform and began the clattery climb up the first lift hill. "Yep. We sent cars through here all morning, but I made sure Rich knew to leave the green machine in the loading bay." "Awesome." As the train climbed up the lift hill, I made no attempt to hide my utter glee. I looked out over the expansive park and couldn't believe that it was mine. Every track, every car, every turnstile, every screw. From the front gate to the overflow parking lot in the back, it was all ours. How I wished I could go back in time and tell a young me waiting in the 2-hour line for Mayhem Mountain that one day you will own this place. And as we crested the hill and the train fell into the first drop, I realized that I essentially had gone back in time. At least I was screaming like a 12-year-old, as was everybody else behind me. We dipped into the first tester hill and then banked hard and up to the second lift hill. We dropped from there down into the vertical loop, banked around a set of gift shops, up briefly, and then down a small hill into the inline roll. When we arrived back at the loading bay, we were all screaming and whooping. Charlotte didn't even have to ask, just smiled at us and sent us through again. We went twice more before we finally got off the ride. Koji walked over to check out the control panel while the rest of us taunted my sister. "You sure you don't want to go, Char? It's awesome." "Nah, I'm good. I have no problem being the carny for this ride," she laughed. "Oh, come on, Charlotte, just one time. One time and we'll leave you alone," Tyler urged. No way, not interested. I'll ride anything else though." "Hey, do you guys know what Track B is?" Koji asked. "Track B? What do you mean?" Brandon walked over to Koji at the control board and raised an eyebrow. "That's weird." "It's probably just the track they used to get the cars into the storage bay," Scott said with a shrug. "No," Koji said. "That's called a transfer track. Track B has to be something else." "Yeah, well, I've been on this ride enough times to know that there is no other track." "Yep," Tyler agreed with me. He has. "So, should we try it?" Brandon tested. "No way, you idiot," said Charlotte. "If you don't know what Track B is, that means the contractors don't know about it either, which means that it hasn't been inspected in at least 20 years. That's suicide." "Look," Koji said. "If Track B exists, then even the most incompetent of engineers would have found it during an inspection." "Yeah, and Rich cleared this entire ride," Brandon nodded. "Probably just the ride in reverse. We're good." "Well, we're in," announced Scott from the other side of the track, though Danny didn't look quite on board with the idea. "Mark?" Tyler asked. "Yeah, I guess I'm in. What's the worst that could happen? We get funneled into a repair bay." "All right, then I'm in too," Tyler said hesitantly. Koji shrugged. "Here goes nothing." He flipped the switch over to Track B, and a moment later a loud metallic scraping some distance away filled the park. The sound lasted almost a minute. I studied the familiar silver roller coaster under the pink sky of the setting sun, but I saw no physical changes to the track. I looked over at Brandon, and a shrug of his shoulders told me that he didn't either. "Shall we?" Scott asked, gesturing to the train cars that we had just disembarked. I gave Charlotte a questioning look, but she shook her head emphatically no. So it was just these 6 of us again. "It's only right that you two take the bow of the ship." Tyler gave a mock salute. "Oh, captains, my captains." I laughed and hopped into the right side of the front row. Brandon crawled into the seat next to me. Tyler and Koji got in behind us, and Scott and Danny took the back. We pulled the shoulder bars down and they locked into place. "Are you sure about this?" Charlotte asked when everybody was settled, and Danny said something from her place a few rows back, but all that I heard was Brandon yelling, "Pull it!" The brakes released and the train rolled away from the platform into the twilight of dusk. The lights had lit up on the track while we had been arguing, and the roller coaster looked absolutely beautiful. I was filled with awe and reverence of what this place truly meant to me and my friends. It was a symbol of our youth and innocence and blissful ignorance of the world. It was our own little bubble of happiness. The coaster again climbed the lift hill, and from the top, Brandon and I studied the track, but in those few seconds I saw no difference. Brandon looked over and I shook my head at him disappointedly. And by the time that we had reached the vertical loop halfway through the ride, it was clear that there was no track B. But it was hard to be upset because I was still on Mayhem Mountain and still found it an impossible challenge not to smile. We banked around the now brightly lit gift shops, up the small tester hill, and then back down to the inline roll. Except the inline roll was suddenly above us. We had missed it. Instead, the track now descended into a large, square hole in the ground behind the gift shops, and we were headed directly into it. I was in too much shock to scream or even move. The black hole swallowed us in an instant, and we descended into complete darkness. I felt a comfortable pressure leave my shoulders and realized that the shoulder bars had been released. I gripped the front lip of the ledge of my seat and heard the terrified screams of my friends behind me as the coaster suddenly spun into what felt like an inline roll. I was too scared to do anything but hold on for dear life, though some part of my brain registered that the G-forces of the roll probably would have been enough to keep me in my seat if I had let go. Probably. We came out of the inline roll and dropped again, hard. As the roller coaster dropped, the room suddenly lit up around us, and I saw the track below arcing up into a light tester hill. As we hit the bottom of the hill, the shoulder bars lowered mechanically. The car went over the small tester hill and then braked to start up another tall lift hill. I took my first breath since dropping through the ground and looked around, tuning out the screams of Danny and Tyler behind me. We were in what can be described as a cavernous room, and I only assume it stretched to the farthest reaches of the park above. There were lots of vertical loops, high drops, and sharp curves that put the track perpendicular to the ground. Throughout the entire sublevel building, lamps dotted the wall every 30 feet. They put out a dreary, yellowed glow for as far as the eye could see, but many were burnt out, and in parts the track disappeared into darkness. But in the dull, yellow edges of the light, I saw something that registered in me a horror beyond death. Far away from us in a section of shadowy track, I saw the high crest of a peak hill which reached almost the ceiling of the giant room. And then the track just ended. Suddenly, feeling the horrible reality of the world outside my mind began to bleed in. Danny was screaming uncontrollably, Tyler was crying, bawling even. Koji was yelling at Brandon, who was looking straight at me, hitting my leg hard and repeating my name. As the cars continued to climb, I finally gave him my attention. I didn't want to be alone in the fear anymore. "What is this?" was all that I could think of to say. "Hey, we have to get off this ride. We have to get off this ride, Mark." "Yeah, I know, man. We're going to die." "I know, man." I yelled as we reached the top of the lift hill and dropped over the other side. I squeezed my eyes shut until I felt the shoulder bars once again release, and I bit my lip to keep from crying. I opened my eyes and choked as I watched the track ahead of us bend up into a vertical loop. I reached up and tried to pull the shoulder bar back down, but it was locked into place. Hang on to the seats," I yelled as loud as I could. As we approached the loop, I felt the brakes engaging, slowing the car, and a tow cable catch beneath my feet. We were being pulled up through the loop, but too slowly for gravity to keep us in our seats. As the train began to invert, I felt my feet rise from the floor of the car. My hair fell over my face and my butt left the seat. I closed my eyes and tried to block out the screams of terror from behind me. I concentrated on my death grip of the ledge of my seat as we rounded the track. We remained upside down for what felt like eternity. Finally, the pressure began to ease. My butt dropped to my seat and my feet to the floor. The white noise subsided from my ears and I heard Koji screaming, "Tyler, no, he fell out. God, he fell out. He's dead, man, he's dead." "He hit the track down there," Brandon yelled at me, wide-eyed and crazy looking. I was finally seeing the Brandon from my youth. The shoulder bars descended again, this time locking in tighter. We came out of the loop and sped up and down several tester hills. I tried to study the track ahead of us as we went through the safer parts. I thought that I saw water reflecting off the metal rails somewhere in the distance. Brandon sobbed in his seat. Mark, what are we gonna do? I don't want to die, man. I don't want to go. I don't know what to do. I'm sorry. I'm so scared too, I answered him. We banked around a corner of the room and the shoulder bars released again. This time we dove into a curve that put the left side of the train parallel to the ground, and it was a long drop. I gripped the edge of the seat tightly as before, but this time I kept my eyes open and was able to catch Brandon as he began to slip out of his seat. And by the time the train had righted itself, I couldn't tell who had been lost. Most of the screaming behind me had turned to loud sobbing or silence. The shoulder bar didn't re-engage and I felt the car's brakes slow the train down again. I didn't have to look to know what was coming next. It was another inverted loop. This one was tall and large and I could tell that we would be upside down for longer. Someone behind me began screaming again, Danny I think, as I tried to take measured breaths and position my hurting hands back under the lip of the seat. Brandon did the same and looked over at me as the car started up the loop with tears streaming down his face. I don't want to die here, man. I shook my head back at him because I could think of nothing to say. I felt tears leave my own eyes as we reached the tipping point of the loop, and my feet again left the floor. Before we were even completely upside down, I felt my back begin to slip down the seat. I thought that if I lost my grip, I could try to grab for the shoulder bars when I fell out of the car. The car suddenly stopped and I opened my eyes to see that we were completely inverted. I grunted loudly at the pain and immense effort that it was taking to keep my grip on the seat. The car started to move again slowly, and I heard Brandon say something to me. I looked over at him just before he slid out of the car. 1 second he was there next to me, and the next he was falling away from the car. I saw Brandon try to grab the shoulder bar on the way out, but he couldn't keep his grip on it. I watched him fall and saw him break his back on the track below and he stopped moving. I stared down at him as the car continued to move slowly around the loop and he stared back up at me, dead or dying. By the time the car hit him on the way out of the loop, he was completely gone. The shoulder bars re-engaged and we went through a dreadfully long period where nothing happened. We were secured in our seats by the restraints as the coaster spent what felt like several minutes racing over hills, banks, curves, and even an inline roll. Without the adrenaline pumping through my veins, I felt the shock begin to wear off. It was replaced by a panic and fear unlike I had ever experienced, and I decided that was the point of this section of track, to build and facilitate an unbearable fear. I felt the brakes engage finally and I looked ahead to find the loop that we were surely entering, but there was none. We were high, almost to the top of the ceiling, and we slowed to a stop on a straightaway. Directly ahead was a drop at the bottom of the hill, a series of 4 different tracks, with a transfer stack just before they split off. Each track had 5 or so feet of color, red, orange, green, and blue, before racing off in different directions. I felt an urgent shaking of my shoulder and turned around to hear what Koji was saying. Which track are we connected to? I looked at the transfer stack. Green. Where does green go? It was hard to hear him over the sound of Danny's sobbing from the second car. I tried to trace the green track through the building, constantly losing it and finding it again. I wasn't sure, but it seemed to end at the lift hill that I had seen earlier. The hill with no track at the top. It ends at that hill. I yelled back at him and pointed. Danny cried out louder. While we were stopped, I rubbed my hurting hands together. As I looked down at them, I noticed something new in the car. At some point, a small blinking panel had flipped over in the wall at the front of the car. It had 4 colored buttons and an old analog timer. The timer was so old and damaged that, though the numbers were clearly changing, I couldn't see how long we had. We get to choose, I said, and explained what I was looking at. Can you see which track ends where? Koji asked. I followed all the tracks as best I could, but the rails circled and slid in between each other. It was hard to tell which track went where. I think the blue track ends in that big pool in the corner. The red track ends in a wall and the orange one just drops into a hole in the floor like the one we came down here through, I think. There's no way out, dude, said Scott from the second car. His voice was unsettlingly calm. They're just telling us how we're going to die. We can still find a way out of this, I answered quietly, more to myself than to him. Choose the pool, Scott said, and I could hear the tears in his voice. I've heard drowning isn't an awful death. I've heard it's calming at the end. No way, choose the hole in the floor, said Koji. It's possible that it drops down into another cavern like this. There might be more track, which means more time to figure out how to live. You don't think we'd be the first to choose that option, do you? Scott asked him, and no one that went missing ever came back. There's just more death in that hole. I don't want to die like this, Koji begged, and at least it's a chance. Danny was still whimpering in the back and offered no suggestion. It seemed the decision was up to me and I had to make it fast. I knew I didn't want to die by dropping off the track. I didn't want to drown. Perhaps the quickest death was the wall. More than likely, we would all be killed instantly. Less suffering, less time to think about our fates. But the truth was, I wasn't entirely positive which track ended where. It was all educated guesswork and my time was up. The orange, let's go down to the second floor if there is one. Scott and Danny said nothing and Koji choked out the last words that I would ever hear him say. Push it before it chooses for us. Before I could think about it any longer, I pushed the orange button and committed us to whatever death it led to. We heard the metallic scraping of the track transferring below. Once the orange track was securely connected, the brakes in the car released and the train rode slowly toward the drop. Danny started screaming again. As we dropped on the hill, I got a better view of the orange track. There was a vertical loop ahead that didn't look as high as the others that we had been through. In fact, it looked like there was a chance that the fall wouldn't kill us. If it wasn't an optical illusion, and if the shoulder bar is disengaged for that loop, we might have a shot at living through this. I yelled back to everybody behind me. Let yourself fall out of the loop, the one up there. Nobody responded to me, which didn't matter because I didn't think that I would have the courage to let go of the seat anyway. We raced along the track in and out of banks and curves. At one point we passed along the pool and I looked down. Below the water's surface, the track ended above an even deeper pool. I could see the shadows of several coaster cars at the very bottom. I suddenly felt the brakes engage and I realized that we were coming to the loop. I tested the shoulder bar by pushing up on it, but it stayed locked. I was somewhat relieved in that moment to know that I wouldn't have to make the decision to fall out now or gamble on the orange track. But suddenly, the restraints released. As we started up the loop, I gripped the lip of the seat tightly and turned my head back to look down. It looked like we were very high and I only hoped the ground was the loosely packed dirt that it looked to be. I had to choose now, the fall or the hole. I chose the fall. As I began to slide up the seat, I yelled at the others to let go and fall out of the car, and then I closed my eyes and let go. I felt my head crack the shoulder bar on the way out. It wasn't like a slow motion fall. It was over before I realized that I'd actually let go. One moment I felt an intense pain as my head hit the bar, and in the same moment I realized that I was on the ground. I hadn't even had the time to realize the possibility of hitting the track below or getting run over by the cars. I opened my eyes in time to watch the cars speed over the track above me. The pain didn't hit me all at once. I had one long, blissful second before I felt it, and then I was in agony. I had hoped my body was so in shock that I wouldn't feel much of the pain, but I felt it all. I concentrated on keeping my eyes open and trying to catalog the damage. There was blood on my clothes, but I didn't know what part of my body it was coming from. I heard screaming as well, but I didn't know if it was in my head or coming from my friends as they approached the end. I didn't want to move, didn't think that it was safe to move, but I knew that I had to, if only to pull out my phone. With trembling fingers, I pulled the thing from my pocket and brought it to my face, trying to focus on the screen. But it was shattered and it refused to even turn on. I threw it away from me and then I realized the silence. Their ride had ended. With a great amount of effort, I rolled over onto my stomach and dragged my broken body across the ground toward where I thought I remembered seeing the hole. I crawled for what seemed like hours, and maybe it was. Sometimes I tried to stand or even kneel, but the pain in my back and ribs was too great. I passed out several times from shock and pain, but eventually I made it to where the track had disappeared into the ground. I pulled myself to the edge and looked down inside the hole. The track ended at just below the surface. It was a natural shaft with walls made of rock. I don't know how deep it went and I didn't want to. It was a fate that I had only narrowly escaped. But then I thought my friends were down there and maybe somebody had survived. Koji! My voice echoed loudly down the shaft. No answer. Scott! Nothing. I reached for a nearby screw and I dropped it down the hole. It took half a minute to land, and when it did, it was with a tink as it hit something metal. The small sound echoed up the shaft and out into the cavernous room, and I realized this place was built with acoustics in mind. I rolled over onto my back and studied everything that I could see from where I was, staving off my body's desire to pass out again. I felt nothing but numbness when I finally saw what I was looking for. A long panoramic window on the far wall. I knew what track B was for, and I finally let myself slip away into the darkness. I remember very little of my rescue. There were lots of people in uniform and my sister yelling, and pain, lots of pain. I was in and out on the way to the hospital, but I remember that I passed through the room behind the window at some point. And from my stretcher through the chaos, I saw in that room a single chair facing the window. It was covered in a deep layer of dust. I was never visited by anyone official, let alone asked to give a statement. Charlotte stayed by my side at the hospital for months while I recovered. She wouldn't say much about that day, although she finally did tell me something. She said that they wouldn't let her ride with me to the hospital and that somebody had offered her a ride. On that drive, she had been spoken to by two people that had convinced her to never speak of what had happened and to convince me of the same. Whatever they threatened her with had her begging me to agree, and I did at the time. I am still to this day learning to walk without aid. I never saw Mayhem Mountain again. The loan defaulted and Adventure Valley was bought up by an unknown LLC, which bulldozed it and built a block of apartments over the top. They're still empty to this day. I don't like the dark anymore. It reminds me of the horror my friends experienced as they looked down and saw the track end before they disappeared into that hole. I try not to think about what they must have felt as they fell down the shaft in complete darkness, strapped to a roller coaster waiting for the terrible end. I wish that I had chosen the pool, if only to save them from that fate. As for the billionaire's son, he was only simple in the fact that he was a man of simple tastes, and he still is. I looked him up once only a few years ago. He owns several amusement parks now, all sizable but small enough to be popular only in their specific regions. In fact, one is not very far from where I live now. I've thought about going many times just to check, just to see. But then I realized that I probably didn't need to search all the rides in the park to know. Because I know that somewhere in that park, some ride in some corner has a track B.